resides. No raised voices, no attack, no heat. Just weaving words, a rhythm cool and neat. He listens close, he lets your thoughts unroll, then finds the thread and takes precise control. Oh, bug in the machine, he set the truth alight, demolishing the shadows, bringing clarity to sight. A master of the mind, a subtle, graceful fight, leaving no doubt, just pure, pure, brilliant light. The points unwind, the arguments align. He sees the flaws, the gaps, the subtle sign. He doesn't crush, he simply disentangles, unraveling the knots, unbending all the angles. No raised voices, no attack, no heat. Just weaving words, a rhythm cool and neat. He listens close, he lets your thoughts unroll, then find.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. I see your background says I can prove God easily.
Yep.
So usually when I talk to people who say this kind of thing, we disagree on some like a semblance of philosophy or like a factual basis. So I'm just curious, can you foresee what that's going to be, or do you want to go through like a whole spiel of how you can prove it out?
Like, do I foresee what we're gonna disagree on?
Yeah, because usually you probably had this conversation before.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's not like something where it's like every single time I run this through someone who's atheist or doesn't believe in God, they're stuck on a specific point. It's kind of different spots. For example, sometimes they disagree that there can't be an infinite regress within a per se causal chain. Sometimes they disagree with the idea of like humans being conscious beings. It's kind of all over the place.
Oh, is it? Do we care about what type of God we're proving out?
No,
Or is it
I
just
just
like
argue
Christian in general?
specifically that by necessity there has to be a fully actualized conscious first
Like
mover.
deity.
Yeah.
So some like end all deity.
Yeah, some starting point.
I guess.
Yeah.
Well, so you already said something that I don't think is. I think that infinite regress is possible. Are you saying
Within
like,
a per se
within
causal
a-
chain?
Let me dissect that. Can you say that differently?
Yeah, do you want me to define a per se causal chain?
I might.
Okay. Yeah, so
Again, we probably disagree on some fundamental things. So we might not even agree. On
yeah,
that
it's all good.
But we'll figure it
So
out.
a per se causal chain is like a series of causes where each member or cause depends immediately and continuously on the one before it or its causal power or existence. For example, if you have a hand, a stick, and a rock, the stick's hitting the rock and the hand's controlling the stick. If one of those things stops moving, let's say the hand stops moving, right? Then the stick's no longer moving and the rock's no longer moving, right? That would be an example of a per se causal chain.
Within a closed system, though, you need a closed system for this.
Mm-hmm.
So your closed system is the universe, I guess you would say, right? And then God is outside of the universe, so you can't use special casing or something.
No. It's God. Like God wouldn't be like an exception for this. Within like the per se causal chain, I don't know if you know like the origins of it, but it doesn't occur specifically in like a closed or open system or anything like that. If you're like,
Well, the only
if
systems
when
we
you're
know
talking
about
about
are
like
closed, right?
closed system, if you're meaning like a system without external input or influence, then it couldn't be like fully contained in a closed system.
I get when I say closed system, I guess what I mean is that you have to take God out of the system for them to not be part of the regress that you're talking about.
Like, like God couldn't be part of the infinite regress.
So
Essentially.
you're saying there's like a tiny universe, and yeah, for our purposes, there's a tiny universe, and someone had to like initially create it.
Mhm.
It couldn't have come into existence, right?
Yeah.
And so, but doesn't that continue on with God? Somebody had to initially create him, or something
No,
else
yeah.
after
So
that?
there would need to be a starting point because there can't be an infinite regress, and there would be aspects to this and this starting point that would be required. For example, like if it were to have potential, then it need to be have an explanation and justification for that. Like it, there's a bunch of different reasons, but the first and foremost, like if we go through the premises, right, it lays out logically, like things are in motion. If something's in motion, then it must be put in motion by another since it can't move itself. Therefore, like things in the universe must be put in motion by another. And then premise 3 would be in a per se causal chain of movers, there can't be an infinite regress. Then there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else. And conclusion 2 would be therefore there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else, and so on, right? But yeah, there's a logical reasons as to why there would need to be like a starting point of first mover.
So when you say infinite regress in a you say per causal chain?
A per se causal chain.
Per se causal. Okay, so when you say per se causal chain, you're basically, can we use the example of like a rock?
Yeah, the
rolling
rock,
downhill?
a stick in a hand. Yeah.
I don't know about the stick in the hand part.
Okay, so essentially, if you imagine a rock and a stick in a hand, right, and the rock only moves when the stick hits it, and then the stick only moves because the hand is moving it, right?
Yeah. Okay.
If
I
this,
get what you did.
yeah, so if the hand were to stop moving, then the stick would stop moving, and in turn the rock would stop moving, right? So in order for the rock to move, if this was a per se causal chain, it would be dependent on the stick continuously moving, and then the stick would require on the hand continuously moving it. You see what I mean?
So, yeah. So critics to this, I think, would say, no, I haven't fully explored all these ideas, so I'm not tied to any of them. But critics would probably say, well, what if when we talk about infinity, it seems like there could be a non-beginning, non-end kind of a situation. So when you start with like there has to be a beginning, how do we get past? How do we like prove that out that there has to be a beginning, and there couldn't be like an infinitural or like
Yeah. So
I don't know, some other kind of a loop.
Yeah. So essentially, if you like another analogy, like if you imagine a per se causal chain as a set of gears where each gear only spins because the previous gear it's already spinning to spin it, right? If you have an infinite regress of gears but no starting point and source for the spinning, for the motion, then none of the gears would move. Essentially, there would need to be a starting point or source for the causal power for the motion in order for the motion to happen.
So why are we saying that? Like I understand logically. why
Yeah,
that
so
follows.
the problem
Well-
is if there isn't a source for the motion, then it's what we would call like, do you know what PSR is?
No, I mean you might remind me here in a second.
Yeah, so a PSR is the principle sufficient reasoning. It's basically a principle that states that there's an explanation or reason as to why, for everything, why it is this specific way, but rather than another. So, for example, if there isn't a source for motion, or like it's just infinite regress and they're all like just in motion, then it would be coming from nothing, which would be what we call a brute fact. And there wouldn't, it would be a violation of PSR, meaning there's not a sufficient reasoning as to where this motion came from or why this motion exists. It just kind of just comes out of nothing, right?
How do I like the live? I don't usually do that. How do I? How do I like the live?
Oh, if you just double tap like the image on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm an idiot.
It's all good.
For some reason, I didn't think it would work the same way. I don't know why. So you're saying there has to be someone who like strikes the first spark or whatever. But it feels. Feel free to correct me, but it feels like that's an assertion that you're making that it has to be that way, and that it couldn't be. There couldn't be some other, like infinity couldn't work a different way.
Well,
Am
like
wrong there,
I have
or-
reasons, for example, like why things can't move themselves and everything. It just depends on what you disagree with. Like, do you understand like the PSR thing I explained when it comes to infinite
I do,
regress?
but there's like other schools of thought here, which is that in mathematics, there is an infinite set, right? I obviously it's like self-explanatory. There's a deeper meaning with what infinite sets mean in mathematics. But here, it's kind of obvious that infinity is possible, and you can look at a number line and look in both directions, and it is infinite. There isn't like a beginning or an end, right?
Yeah, so essentially, like mathematical infinities are what we call conceptual infinities, right? So the difference is within a per se causal chain, it's ontological, right? So meaning it's about, I'm writing it down for my stream. It's about real being and causality. So when we're talking about an infinite regress in math, it's dealing with more of like conceptual structures, right? And those types of things. They don't mean like they don't have like a physically existing infinity. It's just more of like a mental. You could say it's like a mental construct, or and that sort of thing that we use to describe describe things, right? So it wouldn't need like a source versus a per se causal chain is ontological, right? It's about real being and causality. It has a real presence, right? So if you're positing an infinite regress, you would need an explanation for why these things that do exist that way, the source of like what the reasoning and why they are this way rather than another way, and those types of things, because it's a real like being and causality. It's like a real thing versus mathematics being conceptual.
So, but it feels like there's like a special case you're making for God, who doesn't require a causality, doesn't require this ontological properties. Like they don't have to live in this ontological world, like kind of like a Superman in everyone else is human. And it feels like there's no justification for that other than
Yeah, so if I like within the like the premises, right? It logically follows that it would need to be this way by necessity because of a couple things. Firstly, like things are in motion, right? Things are changing, those types of things. Premise 2 is something is in motion, then it must be put in motion by another since it can't move itself. So if these are true, like this is what we call a modus ponens. P1 and P2, if P1 and P2 are true, therefore Q being what in the argument is conclusion 1 being things in the universe must have been put in motion by another, right? I can lay out the full argument if you want.
Let's dissect a little bit more. Can you start at the very beginning? You said, all right, I have two premises I want to start with. If these are both true and we agree on them, then we can build.
Okay.
What
Premise
were they,
1,
one more time?
things in the universe are in motion. Motion meaning change, being the move from a state of potential to actual.
I guess maybe can we? Let's figure out
I
how
can
we can
unpack
possibly
that more.
agree on. No, I don't need that one. The other one is that every like
If some
because I think that's where we're gonna disagree. Is like because you're saying God doesn't count basically.
No, God is in motion. He would be what we call fully actualized.
But so then doesn't he need a cause
Yeah. So
also?
what?
Or that's down the line you're saying.
That's down the line into the argument of why, for example, God would have to be fully actualized, meaning he has no potentiality, because things that have potentiality, like like PSR and those types of things, would need an explanation and reasoning as to why they exist a certain way, and also would need something to actualize it, right? That's actually the reason why things can't just always be actual that aren't God, why a first cause is necessary.
So you're saying motion is like the actualization of potential, and something can't move from nothing. What's this argument called? Is this the
It's a variant. It's my own variant of the argument for motion.
Oh, it is? Okay, cool. God, I'm glad you put your spin on it. Most people just kind of copy and paste and like rely on that the premises will like guide them to what they need. So that's cool that you put your own spin on it.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I guess I'm stuck on this thing that like I don't think that everything is requires like an action to move, or like I don't know that I'm not sure that change requires a mover.
Yeah,
If
so
it did,
like, are you
I think I would agree
positing
with
that
you.
something could move itself?
No, but maybe I am positing that also, but that wasn't the first thing that came to mind when I said. I was thinking more so that like constant motion doesn't require movement, right? Or like someone to put something in motion.
Mhm.
So there's like I know that um this isn't super like on the dot logical, but when we talk about motion, there's um like when you push something into motion and it's a continuous state of motion,
Mm-hmm.
it no longer requires a continue to mover, just initial force.
Yeah, so that would be a different type of causal chain. So within a per se causal chain, it's a specific type of causal chain in which, in order for something to remain actual, it requires something that's already actual before it to continuously actualize it. If you're talking about something that's gets
Yeah,
like
you're right. I
initially
wanna get into that.
actualized and then continues to exist on its own, that's what we call like a per accidents causal chain. So for example, like your mom gives birth to you, actualizing you into existence, and then you don't need your mom to continue to like be alive in order for you to exist, right? That would be a per accidents.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate that example, but I totally get what you're saying. You're right. So I guess, okay, three things about this then. So I guess I still think that cosmologists would argue infinite sets of motion, in not just in mathematics, exist today, I would say. But I would also say like the self is there do you it sounded like you had an argument for self motivation, which I kinda want to hear just in case
Yeah,
I
so
start going down
in
that
order
road.
for in order for motion to occur, motion is the move from a state of potential to actual, right? So for example, you have like a seed, right? A seed has the potential to become a tree. Once it's actualized, it becomes a tree, right? In order for motion to occur, it requires something actual to actualize its potential, right?
Okay.
So with that being said, potential is being defined as something, the capacity becomes something else, but you're not yet that thing. In actuality, something is already that thing or state. So if you were to move yourself, you would have to be actual in the sense of you're already that thing or state, but you'd also have to be potential, meaning you're not yet that thing or state, which would violate the law of non-contradiction. That's why something can't move itself.
I think I for the most part agree with you. Like it feels like there are systems and situations where none of what you're saying applies, but it seems like those all do have not necessarily special cases, but they are. I don't want to say that you're logicking me out of them, but you're making points that I agree with. So I want to continue with your premises. There's something gnawing at me to say the infinite regress is an issue, but is that in the future, or are we moving past that?
No, we can talk about the infinite regress if you're hung up on that. What's next
Well,
is
no, it sounds
premise
like it's
3,
in
which
your
is that
next
there
one.
can't be an infinite regress.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe it'll happen before that because maybe you'll iron out my logic, or maybe I'll iron out yours. I don't know.
Yeah, so now with the first two premises, we have conclusion 1, which is things in the universe have been put into motion by another. Premise 3 is if there is a per se causal chain of movers and it cannot regress infinitely, then there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else, with conclusion 2 being, therefore there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else. So going back to the infinite regress, right? The infinite regress, like I explained to you before, I can explain again if you want, leads into a violation of the principle of sufficient reasoning. Now, a violation of PSR, I'll just say PSR for short, so we don't have to like say out the whole
Yeah.
name, leads into a violation of the law of non-contradiction, which is what which I would affirm is something that can't happen. It'd be like what we call a logical impossibility.
I don't use a lot of these phrases and words in my everyday life, so I feel like I do have to mentally translate and then
Yeah, I can
reorient.
define anything you need defined.
So when you say so, because you're probably in this world a little bit more than I am, or not in this world, but like talking about this more often. So it's probably you probably start to use the acronyms a little bit quicker, and
Mhm.
your brain follows it. So just be patient with me if you don't mind.
Mhm.
So so you're saying so you haven't got. I'm going to accuse you of making a special case for God in a minute, but you haven't even done that yet. So I can't really get you on that. This is more about, is there someone at the very beginning of this chain? And if not, like, how could it be possible? If we roll a rock down a hill and the hill is infinitely long downward and infinitely long upward, how conceptually can we validate that real material could be applied in that concept? I can't think of a situation in which, but it does seem like the universe is like infinitely expanding. So I guess
I would
I guess
argue that
I don't
there's
know if that's
like the expansion of the universe or the idea that time goes on infinitely in the future. Like those are fine, right? It's specifically an infinite regress that's a problem, because it leads into
because none of those
a
are
violation
caused
of
by
PSR.
like an initial. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Like none of those are being caused. They're
Yeah,
all seem to
because
be naturally.
infinity into the future, it isn't a problem because there's like a grounding or reason as to why it is that way. Versus with an infinite regress, it leads into there not being a grounding at all, and this stuff is just like coming out of nothing, right? Which I would affirm that a violation of PSR can't happen because a violation of PSR or denying PSR leads into a violation of the laws of logic, which I would also affirm can't happen.
I think I nailed down. Oh, you added someone else. I'm sorry. I don't want to be dealing with.
No, Siv's just my friend. He's just gonna listen right now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, Sid? Okay, so I guess here's probably the crux. I think I figured it out. If we put like somewhat, no, I don't want to say that. If we like left a rock on the sidewalk and someone came along and they saw it, they could assume it was like in a naturally occurring situation. It most likely would be, but you could also just not know how that rock got there, right?
Yeah.
So I guess from my perspective, there's something here saying like it seems like we don't know all the facts, but we are asserting that it has to be this way based on observations of the world.
Like what I'm saying is just based on observation of the world.
Well, no, like you're saying that if there's movement and we look across the universe and it's always the case that when there is movement, someone moved it, right? That's always been the case up until now. So therefore, it always had to have been the case.
Yeah, that's not what the argument's about. Like, obviously, there's some case of like observation in the sense like we see things moving, but the reason as to why there must be a mover and those types of things are like they grounded upon metaphysical truths and logic, something objective versus like our subjective appearances. If it were to be grounded based on like our subjective experiences, then this argument wouldn't have like any weight or wouldn't matter at all. Because like it was just, you could argue that it's just based on our current knowledge and it's kind of just like an argument from ignorance.
Yeah, well, because you're saying it's like having a rope or like a chain hanging down from the sky, and you're saying that my argument is like saying nothing's up there holding it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm saying there could be something up there holding it, we just don't know what it is.
Well, so you can posit, like, for example, let's say it's a being and its name is Bob, but we don't know it's Bob. Like, that's fine. You don't need to know the name. You just, like, for example, with the starting point, we would just need to know that there needs to be a first cause that has X, Y, and Z attributes by necessity. Whether it's like, the name of that thing, or like it's called Yahweh or called Allah or whatever, that doesn't matter, right? We just know that this being has to exist by necessity with X, Y, and Z attributes.
But so instead of the being existing, like if we were to say, okay, it has to exist, or something in like if it was necessarily true that this being couldn't exist, I feel like there are still possibilities that we could logically be open to, is what I'm saying. And so, does that make sense?
What do you mean, like possibilities, like other
So
explanations?
with the chain hanging from the sky, and we find out that okay, it's somehow we like necessarily find out that there can't be deities or gods or something like that. We find that out necessarily, and then we have to start positing why this chain could be hanging from the sky without any support.
Yeah, that wouldn't
and I'm
really
saying
work
there-
for my argumentation. So what I'm arguing, like the syllogism and what I'm laying out, is what we call a deductive argument. So if you affirm the premises, then the conclusion, and it logically follows, then the conclusion's a necessary conclusion, right? So, like, really, you would, in order for you to hold that position and those types of things, you would have to like show either how, if you agree with the premises, then show how my argument doesn't logically follow, or show how like at least one of my premises doesn't hold up, doesn't work. For example, let's say if you don't believe that humans are conscious, and I affirm in premise 5 humans are conscious beings possessing intellect and will, you would have to logically you would have to show, for example, like humans aren't conscious, and I'm wrong, and if that's the case, then my argument's thrown out the window, right?
So okay, so with your premise, then when you're saying infinite regress is like impossible, right?
Mhm.
It seems to be possible in some contexts. So when we say that it's impossible, we have to put qualifiers on
Yeah.
the context. It's
Yeah,
impossible.
whenever I
when
refer
we
to it
put those-
being impossible, it's within a per se causal chain specifically.
But even when we put it into that context, we're boiling away all the other possibilities without like you're saying these other things aren't possible anymore without proving they're impossible. If that makes sense.
Well, when I say an infinite regress is impossible in a per se causal chain, there's two options. It's either A, possible, or B, impossible, right? I can, like as I did before, I can logically show how it's impossible, for example, because A, it violates PSR, which I would say is a necessary truth, because denying PSR violates the law of logic, which the laws of logic I would affirm are like necessary truths. In which I can justify those things, right? So that would be me showing how an infinite regress is impossible out of the two options we have, right? So it's not like there's like 80 different options for whether infinite regress can happen or not, and I'm just picking like
Sorry.
one. There's only really two.
I just got a phone call and it blocked out like the last 15 seconds.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, I was just saying that whenever I say there can't be an infinite regress within per se causal chain, there's only two options: either there can be or there can't be, right? If I can logically show that they can't happen, it either it's a metaphysical impossibility, it violates like the laws of logic or those types of things, then I've properly shown that a infinite regress in a per se causal chain is impossible, right? Which I can do.
So I guess maybe my contention's about the per se causal chain.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just Google that and see if maybe we're talking past each other. Hold on.
Yeah, I can define it for you as well if you want.
Yeah, I know. I think you did already, but it didn't seem to help. I think maybe I need a visual context. Or
Yeah.
something. Because I truly am trying to engage. I'm trying to understand you. Superficial layer, CCDC. That is not helpful. Wow, the first things that come up are super not helpful. Okay, so what I'm saying is that it's the example I'm saying is that there's a health provider who's vague about medication, then there's a medication error, and then a longer hospital stay.
What?
The example I'm saying for the causal chain is that a health provider provides medication. The medication has an error, or the provider is vague. There's a medication error, and then a longer hospital stay due to that.
That's not.
and then
There's
there's
not
also
like a
a
per
severe-
se causal chain.
And there's also a severe illness involved related to the medication error. So
That would just be
basically-
like a generic causal chain. I'm specifically talking about a per se causal chain, which would be like the rock, stick, and the stone analogy.
So help me understand the difference between like, because I guess when I was saying like the chain in the sky, that's obviously just a causal chain, then, right?
It can be, or it also could refer to like a per se causal chain in the sense like each chain is holding up a chandelier. If one of the chains disappears, then like all the chain, or i.e. ceases to be actual, then all the chains below it that it's actualizing are no longer holding up, like connected to the ceiling, and then the chandelier falls.
Right. That's so you're saying, action due to change in.
What I'm saying is like it's just a causal series where each member or thing that's part of the causal series depends immediately and continuously on the one before it for its causal power or existence. And if any cause in the chain stops, the entire chain below it ceases instantly.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry that took so long. Okay. So you're saying that infinite regress can't exist in a causal chain. So the context is the causal chain. Because if we're talking about a concept, it can happen, but that shouldn't be applicable here. And you write that off. I guess I don't know. Is it when you isolate that the causal chain thing?
Mhm.
I feel like something's happening there where you're like putting a box, or you're like walling off a bunch of solutions that are possible.
Like there's other options. Like, are you saying that like a per se causal chain might just not exist and there's like other options, essentially?
I mean, I guess my first instinct was to say, like that there are examples, there are situations in which this doesn't work, right? And you're saying that those situations be couldn't be where the universe started or began, or whatever.
Like, I don't get what your contention is. Like, are you? Is your contention?
I'm
like,
fighting with myself right now a little bit because I'm trying to decide if I believe infinity can exist outside of conceptualization, and if I do believe infinity can exist outside of conceptualization, I want to fight you on this.
Yeah.
But if I don't care, and I want to move on.
Yeah.
So I guess what do you think about that, and what do you think about my internal struggle to decide?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, if there is an infinite regress within a per se causal chain, it leads in. Do you affirm the laws of logic, like, as objective truths? Like, for example, contradictions can exist.
Usually when they do exist, it's like in perceptionality, like two people disagreeing on a perception. So I don't think they can exist in an objective fashion, like two things.
I mean, like, for example, let's say like my water bottle that's right in front of me could at the same time and same respect be there and not be there, or like
no, I don't. Even people that refer to Schrodinger's cat misunderstand it. Yeah, I don't believe that. I think that perception can be different. You can think it's not there.
Yeah, but in reality, like, it's not possible.
But I do believe in like one timeline kind of a situation where everyone's living in it but sees it differently.
Yeah. Okay, so with that being said, then what I'm positing is that ultimately what happens is if there is an infinite regress, it leads into a violation of PSR because there isn't a sufficient grounding or reasoning as for the causal chain, like where the motion comes from, etc. Right? If it's really just like essentially like with a PSR, like let's say you exist, right? You go back and find the explanation as to why you exist and so on, and ultimately there needs to be like a starting point, right? If there's just infinite amount of reasons, like, oh, you go back to this thing and this thing and this thing forever, ultimately it's just a delay, like there is no grounding, right? So I would argue that if an infinite regress, like the reason infinite regress can't happen in a per se causal chain is because it violates PSR, and I can explain like a violation of PSR would violate the law of non-contradiction, which contradictions can't exist, right? So you can't, therefore, PSR can't be violated, and therefore there can't be an infinite regress in a per se causal chain.
I know this is a lot of this is way down the line, but I guess when we're talking about this, I know I'm opening the door to Christianity, right? So with that, there's like a load of stuff that's going to show up later, which is that like Joshua asked God to stop the sun in the sky, and like I know all that's coming way down the line, right? So when we're talking about this stuff now, it feels weird to me to try to like allow manipulation of physics and ideologies and stuff later on in this discussion if we were to get there. But right now, when we talk about like things that we can't imagine, because in our observational universe, everything that doesn't have a cause has always just dropped to the floor without motion every time that's ever happened. And so for me, I'm struggling here because I know I have to open the door to all this stuff that can't be applied to physics and to science and all this stuff later on. But in the frontwards part, we're like stopping and saying, hey, it's definitely impossible that all this other stuff can't exist. Do you see like why I'm struggling with that?
Yeah, I think what you're focusing on, like, you're not focusing on like the argument being laid out here and like whether you agree with the argument as it's being laid out here now and whether it's valid, but instead you're focusing on like future like potentially where it leads, which I would say isn't really like valid logic. It's more of like coming in with this thing like, okay, I don't want to like believe or affirm God, so with that being said, I know where this leads me, so I'm just gonna like deny or not accept the argument because it leads to a God existing, rather than your denial being based on whether what the argument's saying is valid or invalid, right?
Yeah, I understand why you think that's what I'm saying. I really am trying to engage like with an open heart here. So when I say this, like I know that Joshua is gonna say that he stopped the sun in the sky, like later on, like he's gonna say that celestial bodies like moved differently than they move today, and that like the sun was like I know all this sciencey stuff is claimed later on, and what I'm struggling with is that to forget all about all of that right now and to try to allow Christianity to like scientifically prove out its process, but then when I want to apply that scientific process in other places, it seems like you're going to say it doesn't apply there.
No, I like it. Science. So the thing is, like, when you're talking about science, right? Well, this is like one of the reasons why like scientific arguments for God don't work. It's ultimately going to be grounded upon subjectivity and like what we've experienced and known so far. For example, like we've experienced that this reaction happens this specific way, but like it's subjective, right? Like it's not going to be, we don't know if it's objectively the case that this works this way, right? If your contention really is on whether like Joshua actually stopped the sun or not, it comes in with like a like preconception of like a divine, like all-powerful being not existing, because if one did exist, as long as it's logically possible to do something like that, it could stop the sun, right? But that's not really a problem. So really, I think if you're having a contention with that, the logical step is to address whether a divine being does exist or doesn't exist, because if it doesn't, then that entire story is impossible, and even the Bible itself is not true. But if a divine being does, then that kind of answers your question on whether the sun could stop, because it would be logically possible for an all-powerful, like fully actualized being to be able to stop the sun without like the solar system crumbling, right?
To me, your philosophy is getting a little shaky there, right? In my perspective, like if I found out there was a race of alien beings who had like such scientific capabilities, they were godlike powers or magic, it would open the possibility in my mind that like something I thought was a natural process was now manufactured. Like that's basically what you're saying, right? Is that if I found out God existed, things that I thought were maybe natural or like of other contexts, I could now attribute to God because that possibility is now open to me, right?
Well, like miracles could
In the
exist logically.
same way that,
Sure.
well, in the same way that if I found out an alien race had like super science capabilities and the capability to create Earth, I might hypothesize if I found that out that they created Earth or something, right? In the same way.
Mm-hmm. I see where you're coming from.
So, in my, if I was trying to like criticize it, which I'm not, but if I was trying to like criticize this argument, I would say it feels like we're walking away, we're leaving a lot on the table of possibilities, and we're walling off those possibilities to say that there's definitely like a God or a mover or a God or a deity or something like that, because we don't know the answers to so many questions.
No, okay.
Well,
No, it's not like it's not based on like whether we know the answer to something or not. Like there could be a scientific answer. I'm really just saying that your contention is based on like whether it's scientifically possible or not, which it could be, right? Like obviously science and our understanding isn't objective, right? We're constantly learning. We can even experience this historically where like in the 600s we believe lightning came from God. Now we know that there's a scientific explanation for that. Like there's constantly
Right.
knowledge and breakthroughs and things that completely change how we like understand. Like right now there's stuff with quantum physics where like certain people believe that like quantum physics can defy the laws of physics and that type of thing, and there's things that can like only be
Yeah, the
in a
lepton
specific
experiment, is that what
state
you're
when we
talking
see
about?
them. It's like science is pure, like subjective. It's not like an objective grounding on how something works. It's constantly evolving, right? So like I feel ultimately I think what's best is to focus on the argument itself and what I'm laying out and whether it's valid or not versus going in with like I don't believe in God or want to believe in God, so because of that like I understand where if I do affirm this it leads me. So instead of affirming or rejecting it based on like what's logically valid, I'm affirming or rejecting it based on where it will end up leading me and whether I want to like affirm that God exists or not.
No, it's not that I don't like if you were to say if things that you were saying necessarily followed later, like if you were to say I want to use all of these same propositions when I prove through like the Bible's variants, the Catholic Church's like effect on like scripture throughout time or something like that. If you were to use all of this logic and science throughout your reading, like we'd probably get along great. We'd probably agree on like most things, and you probably have a minor. If I were to compare your views to other Christian views, you probably have a minority and a much firmer reading of all those things, right? So I'm not trying to argue with you in such a general sense of like I don't want to believe in God, so we're not gonna follow this logic train. I've experienced this logic train over and over again, and when I get to the end of it, it never makes sense to me. So I'm being critical along the way. I'm trying to be honest, but it's not that I don't want to believe in God. It's more so that it seems like the logic that we're using isn't applied evenly.
Okay, so with what I've laid out so far, is there anything that's not being applied evenly? Or is it like all follow so far?
It all follows except for like something that I don't feel smart enough to talk about until I go look up some more stuff right now, which is that if an infinite regress is only conceptual or something, maybe I agree with you.
Within mathematics.
If it can't have,
Yeah.
or sorry, infinite regress. If an infinity set is what I meant to say. If an infinity set only exists within conceptual grounds, I might agree with you. But I also like there's so many other thoughts I have, which is like, okay, what if God only exists in the conceptual grounds then, or what if like that would make a lot of sense to me personally. But there's like a whole bunch of other things that we just aren't talking about. We're kind of walking away from because we're following these premises.
Well, yeah, if there's like something specific that like, let's say if you affirm this premise, like it would disagree with this viewpoint you have. So you want to talk about that viewpoint, like we can do that. That's fine. I have no problem with
Yeah,
that.
we can't really because I think that infinite sets probably exist. They're just not super easy to conceptualize, or like I
Okay.
like even
Well,
that,
okay.
I think
Let's take that, right, with what I said with why there can't be an infinite regress in a per se causal chain. Does that make sense? Or because if you do affirm that there can be an infinite regress, would you agree that that violates PSR?
I think again, like the only connection I have there is that I think there's like possibilities of even in a causal chain that you haven't considered or that like we don't understand. Maybe I think there are possibilities there. But if you want to say there's like a firm logic to why,
What do you mean
why
by like
that?
possibilities there?
So you're saying so we're what's the example that you keep using about infinite regress? The rock,
No, 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 no.
the stick.
That was the example of per se causal chain. If there's an infinite regress within a per se causal chain, it would be like going back to the gears analogy. It's just an infinite regress of gears, right? That would then just be spinning and causing the gears in front of it to spin and so on, right? If there is no source for that motion for the spinning, right? Because within a per se causal chain, in order for something to spin, or this gear to spin, it would require a previous gear that's already spinning to spin it, right? If there's just an infinite regress with no
right there.
source, right, it would be for the spinning, for the motion. It'd be what we call like a brute fact, right? Which would violate PSR. There's no like source or grounding for where the motion comes from. It just kind of just keeps going back, right?
Which your first premise was like that motion needs to have a cause or something like that, right?
My first premise is things in the universe are in motion.
Are in motion, and the second one was that everything needs a cause. Or
If something
like
is
that, right?
in motion, then it must be put in motion by another since it can't move itself.
So maybe like is that? I think. Why am I getting so tripped up here, man? I feel like I'm saying, you're saying, hey, in the universe there don't seem to be infinity sets outside of concepts. So in that case, a per se causal chain can't infinitely regress over itself, or else one of those things, those causes, would need like a dead end, and we would.
It's
But I
not
guess,
that like
okay,
we don't like
how do you
observe that
know
there's
all
an
this
infinite
stuff?
regress and those types of things. It's not based upon just like what we observe, because like I said before, if the argument's
Yeah.
based on what we observe, then it's purely subjective and it doesn't really hold any weight, right? It kind of be like a
So
argument from ignorance or gods of the gaps or those types of things. It's
so it's
based
not
on
observation,
like
then what?
yeah, it's based on like objective metaphysical truths and like logic, right? And those type of
Okay,
things.
maybe that's where we disagree then. It seems to me like it's based on experience and not metaphysical data or psychological truths. So maybe you can prove me wrong there.
Yeah, like so
what
with what I
truths would,
said, like what appears to be based on observation? Like is there a specific thing?
that everything that's being moved is caused by like a mover or something.
Yeah, okay. So for why the reason that is because something can't move itself, right? The reason as to
But how do we
why
know that?
yeah, so the reason as to why something can't move itself is because it would be what we call a logical impossibility or a metaphysical impossibility, meaning it violates the law of non-contradiction. For something to move, moving is like motion is defined as the move from a state of potential to actual. Potential being something has the capacity to become something else but is not yet that thing. Actuality is something is already that thing or state. In order for something to move itself, it would have to be actualizing its potential. So it would have to already be that thing or state, and at the same time, in same respect, also not yet be that thing or state, which would violate the law of non-contradiction. The P and not P being P, it is that thing or state, not P, it's not that thing or state.
So okay, so I get it. So a circle, like a square, can't have 3 and 4 sides. I get it. So there are things that are, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying it violates the law of non-contradiction, which is a
But yeah,
logical
in the same
possibility.
way as like a square, something can't have 3 sides and 4 sides. It's like impossible.
Yeah, at the same time, in
right?
same respect. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you're saying it's not observation based. It violates the law of non-contradiction. Would that be correctly summing up what you're saying
Yeah,
back to?
it's it's based upon like the metaphysical truths, not just based upon observation or like what we observe. It's not something like, oh, we see it's this way, so it's that way. Not like that.
Yeah, it's just like an axiom.
Okay, hold on. So, so you understand, because it's hard for me to like parse through all this at once. But so you're making a claim that this violates the law of non-contradiction. Um,
Mhm.
So if there's a chain hanging from the sky and that chain isn't held up by anything, that breaks the law of non-contradiction. That's what you're saying, right?
If there's a chain hanging from the sky and it's attached to nothing,
Yeah, based on like the obvious
okay,
context I'm giving
it
you.
would be like, let's say, in order for something to hang, you affirm that it has to be attached to something, and then we see that there's a chain that is hanging but it's not attached to something. I mean, that would lead into a violation of law of non-contradiction, because you affirm that in order for something to hang, it has to be attached to something, and since it's hanging, like, and not attached to something, it'd be a contradiction. Yeah.
So I guess how is the law of non-contradiction not based on observation?
Yeah,
It's an axiom.
it's something we call like a self-evident truth, right? So that means like to deny it requires it to be true. So let's say, or also it's kind of called a performative contradiction, meaning like the act of asserting something must presuppose the truth of a certain principle, i.e. the law of non-contradiction. So let's say you are to say that the law of non-contradiction is false. In order for you to say that that's false, that means it would be true that you believe it's false, right? There's a distinction between the word false and true there, right? Those words have meaning. If it were false, then that means that your statement that the law of non-contradiction is false is also simultaneously true. It's also simultaneously a claim that you believe the law of non-contradiction is true, right? Which obviously isn't the case, right? This is why it's a self-evident truth. And if you affirm that there's like things like that can happen and things can just be completely irrational, then at that point it leads to what we call epistemic collapse, right? Which means that no statement, including your statement, can be trusted as coherent, true, or referential. Like any logical discourse or meaning behind anything observed or said or thought is completely irrational and unintelligible and meaningless.
Yeah, this is interesting because so conceptually, you're saying, let's go. What's the last premise you had was, in a closed system there can't be infinite recursion, or not in a closed
Not
per
closed
se
system.
causal chain or whatever. To me, it's a closed, like, to me, I basically functionally what you're saying is a closed system.
What would you be
where
defining
God's
as
outside of that
closed system?
Just like something that can't be applied to God. He's outside of it.
Well, it would still be applied to God, like that there can't be an infinite regress and those types of things. And something
I
can't
think-
move itself. Like those are all true. That's actually one of the reasons why God would have to be fully actualized.
So, don't you understand that like God would then require a mover of himself, and like and he would require a birther, or and so on and so forth.
He would require a mover if he moved. Like, for example, moving being the move from a state of potential axial. Since God, like, one of the reasons why God would have to be fully actualized is because to have potentiality would require an explanation and those types of things, which leads into an infinite regress if there isn't something that's fully actualized. But B, it would mean that in order for him to move, it would require something to actualize it.
Sorry, hold on. Wait, can we go back a step? Which you said that God, so, because God puts energy into the universe, right? And so that energy has to come from somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that kind of help me understand why that's not that energy displacement doesn't require like a origin. Because you're saying he pumped it into our universe. There was nothing, right? And he displaced energy
the origin
from.
is himself. Like the energy or whatever originates from God.
So who moved God? Who is his mover?
He doesn't have a mover because he doesn't move. He doesn't he doesn't
So
change.
he's outside of the. So he's outside of the causal.
No,
chain.
he's still inside the causal chain. He's the start of it. He's just always actualized. That's what it like
He's
means
the
to be fully
unmoved
actual.
mover.
Yeah. So he's always been actualized. Once again, motion or moving is defined as the move from a state of potential to actual, right? Since there is no potential, he couldn't move. There is no potential in him. He's always actual.
So you're saying God is the chain hanging from the sky with nothing attached to him?
No, he would be like if he would be the ceiling that would hold the chain up.
So who created the ceiling, though? Right? Like, or what's
The ceiling
what's
exists by
connecting-
necessity. Like as I said, if you affirm that in order for something to hang, there needs to be a ceiling for it to connect to, and something's hanging, then therefore there would need to be something holding it up. That would be more analogous. By necessity.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking you is like, so earlier when I said, okay, well, so just the same thing to you, right? So how can God exist if everything needs a cause and he just doesn't have one?
We wouldn't affirm that we wouldn't affirm exhaustively that everything needs a cause, because obviously.
So how do you get
doesn't
God
need a
out of? Yeah, how do you get God out of the causation chain? Like if you're saying everything
Yeah, like
requires-
out of my argument
is on an init chain.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if we lay out like with the first two premises, we affirm with conclusion one that the things in the universe have been put in motion by another. With the third premise about the infinite regress, we then affirm in conclusion two that then there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else. So we already have God here, and then after that we affirm in premise 4 says that whatever is not moved by another must have no potentiality, which then therefore the first mover is pure act, meaning it's fully actualized. So we already have a fully actualized first mover. And then premise 5, humans are conscious beings possessing intellect and will. Premise 6, according to the principle of proportionate causality, the effect must pre-exist in its cause formally, virtually, or eminently. Premise 7, since consciousness exists in human beings and the first mover is the ultimate cause of all being, it must possess consciousness eminently or formally. Premise 8, only a being that is itself conscious can possess consciousness in this way. And then conclusion 3 is, therefore the first mover must be conscious. And this fully actualized conscious first mover is what we call God.
So
That's
how
we
do you
derive
get
it.
away from, when I was talking about infinity sets earlier, how do you differentiate an infinity set conceptually from what you're calling God here? Like, what are the differences between those two things?
What do you mean? Like an infinity set? What do you mean? Like how?
So it's a concept that exists, right? Like you believe in it, that a number line could go infinitely one direction, infinitely another.
uh-huh.
I actually have a question about this like infinite set, if you don't mind. I'm assuming you're referring to set theory, right?
Yeah. What about
No,
the?
I'm not. I did math in college, so maybe monster theory would be the closest thing I'm referring to.
Well,
but
I
no,
think
it's just
if you know what Russell's paradox is, I think that would differentiate God being infinity or infinite with that, because so with this infinite
I'll be
set,
back,
does
one
it
sec.
contain itself?
I'm looking up Russell's paradox too.
Russell's paradox is like about essentially it's an infinite set, but the set doesn't contain itself, right? So this set is an ontological thing. It contains everything ontological, but it doesn't contain itself. That would be Russell's paradox. So that's how I would differentiate an infinite set. I'm assuming you're referring to set theory, right? This set's made up of elements.
I'm not sorry. You think I'm smarter than I am. No, I was referring more to monster group theory, which is just like this idea of different sets of infinities. It's a math thing.
Contained of elements, though, right?
What do you mean by contained elements? Just like
So there's going to be an ontological thing by which it contains, and this thing it contains has to exist, right? Because it's contained by something.
Sorry, you said there's an. Hold on. You said an ontological. You added ontological something in there. What was?
Element. Yeah. So this set, I was just asking you if it contains any ontological items, any things that actually exist, and I'm assuming your answer is yes, right?
No, it's not. It's
Okay,
a
so
concept.
these things don't actually exist, right?
Yeah, like language, like it's conceptual.
Well, I mean, conceptual things still exist; they're just not real. Like you can say,
Sure,
like
yeah.
you can say, like math is. Yeah. Okay. So they do exist; they're just not real, right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So would you say this set is real?
So the set I'm talking about, the infinite set.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
the
would
thing
be
that
real,
contains
yeah.
the elements.
Yeah.
So does the thing contain itself? Because it is a thing, and it's supposed to be infinite, right?
Contain. I don't know that it contains anything. I don't know that there's a container.
Well, no, you said the set is made up of elements, but these elements are ontological things, right? But it's an infinite amount of ontological things, right?
When you say ontological, usually I think you're talking about like existence and reality.
Yeah, just things that
And so
exist.
when you talk about
No, not in
concepts-
reality, not in reality. Just something that exists. That's all I mean.
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're saying,
So
like,
all I'm saying is that if this infinite set contains everything, does it contain itself?
maybe you can explain this to me if I give you an example. Like there's an
Hmm?
infinite amount of numbers between.
But you're a little far away from the mic. I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. Is this better?
You're good. Wait, speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. What were you saying?
Maybe I'm having trouble understanding. Maybe if I give you an example, you can tell me what about it I'm missing.
Alright.
Which is that when I think of infinity, there's an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 1. But you can just always add another 9 at the end, right? Infinitely. Like dot 9. You can just keep going smaller, right? So when you say that, are you saying that all those numbers are contained in themselves or something? Like, how do
No,
I
in a
contain?
set. So when you said there's an infinite set, there has to be something containing this infinite these infinite items, or this item that's infinite, whatever you want to call it.
So a limit.
Unlimited. No. It's not. There's no limit. It's just
But when
containing
you say
infinity.
when
That's
you say
what you-
contain, it insinuates a limit, though, right? You get that?
No. What I mean by contain is there's elements that are of this thing. It's not being like cut off at like a line or something.
When you say contain, you don't mean holding or something. You mean the
I mean,
elements
there's
are similar?
things that are of this. There's things that are of this set, so they
Like a
relate to this set.
taxonomy, kind of a verbiage situation.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just you asked like what is the difference between God and this infinite set, and I'm assuming with this infinite set it contains everything, right?
I like within its label, yeah.
So does it contain itself? Does the
I mean-
set actually exist, right? It's like something. Well, it could be conceptual or whatever, but you agree this set that we're questioning does exist.
I'm not trying to be a dick. It feels like you're playing a word game and you're using the word to kind of like get around the idea.
No. So we have a set, right? And we have elements that make up the set. So these are two things. We agreed that the
So-
elements are infinite.
Wait, can you define those things? Like, with an
Yeah,
example?
the set is going to be the things that contain the elements, or it's going to be the thing that contains the elements, and the elements are going to be things that the containment or that are being contained. So there's
Can you
just
give me an example? It would help.
yeah, like I have a cup of water here. The water would be the element. The cup would be the container, right? Or the containment.
So you get why I'm getting confused with the limit part, right? Is there
Well,
an
it's an
example you could
infinite
use
set,
that?
so that's why it's not. Well, it's not in reality. You said it's conceptual, so there can be a container that's infinite, given the fact it's conceptual. It's not like real.
So, but this feels like it falls on its face about your infinite regress thing earlier a little bit, right?
How?
In that if you can have an infinite like container basically. So couldn't
Yeah.
so couldn't this concept that we're talking about of like time or the beginning, like there isn't necessarily a beginning, because
Well,
it could be
no,
that.
I'm rejecting the fact there can be an infinite set. That's why I'm appealing to Russell's paradox.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's why I'm saying that that's going to be the differentiator. That's going to be the symmetry breaker between God and the infinite set you're bringing. That was your question, right? You were asking what's the difference
I
between
think so.
God and the
Yeah.
infinite
No,
set.
I think if you accuse me of saying like no, there isn't really an infinite set, in that you think it is because it seems like it, but there's something you're missing.
Well, no,
Can
I'm
you help me
granting you.
understand?
I'm granting you there is an infinite set. I'm just
But
showing
you
you the
don't
problems
think
that follow.
actually. But you don't think actually there is, right?
Well, I believe if there was an infinite set, it would have to contain itself. And if it contains itself, it's just going to run into eternal regress. Because now you have two infinite sets. But those sets also have to contain themselves. So it's just going to keep
But when
on
you-
going.
I'm really having a hard time understanding when you say contain though. Like I
The,
know
element,
you
the
must mean
elements are being
something.
contained. The set is the thing that contains the elements.
But there is no like you're invoking something when you say contain, right? You're invoking a bunch of
Yeah,
meaning there.
that's going to be.
And to me,
Mhm.
it's not being contained. Rather, like what you're saying is that like everything in mammals, that's a container. Like mammals, you're using that taxonomy, right?
Well, what I mean by contain is just these things are of the thing in question, which would be the set. They're of the set. They're within the set conceptually.
But when you say contain, you're applying like the meaning of that word deeper than just that. Like when you say that God. What
What do you mean I'm
getting what
using the
I'm-
word contain like deeper? What does that mean?
So, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems like you're saying that there's an infinite set of numbers between 0 and 1, okay? And therefore the container is 0 and 1.
No, it's not no. So within like axiomatic set theory, the set isn't of the same group as the elements.
It's the
You don't have a
definition.
set that's not, huh?
It's like the definition of the item, right?
What's the definition of the item? The element?
Well, if we're talking about like what I'm saying is not that it's contained, therefore limited by between 0 and 1. What I'm saying is that we're defining it by that it is in between 0 and 1, and all
the
of these
elements,
items are
right?
in between 0
Yeah,
and 1.
the elements, but not the set. So the set can be like, let's say like a something that groups things together. That can be a set. The elements are going to be like numbers. So you can have like a set that contains numbers, but the set isn't a number itself. But if we're speaking about infinity, that means everything is contained within the set. That means the set has to contain itself because it exists. It's an ontological thing.
Well, so I just gave you an example of an infinite amount of numbers in between 1 and 0. That doesn't include everything of its element, right?
That doesn't contain everything of its element? What do you mean by that?
Right. So 0 and 1 doesn't, every infinite number in between 0 and 1 doesn't include any numbers after 1, including 2, 3, 4, but there's still an infinite amount of them, right?
Well, I would hold to the position that like if you're speaking about infinity according to numbers, it's going to be different when you're speaking about God, because when you're speaking about numbers, it's just ever going, like it's ever expanding. It's kind of like the universe, right? I would say that form of infinity is different than God, because God isn't ever expanding. God's not something that like expands or is like corporeal like numbers or the universe.
So it seems to me that when we find other things that we could maybe try to compare this concept to, you're saying there's a special case of God and we shouldn't apply these ideas to God.
Well, when you're speaking about infinity in like the number sense, yeah, because God's not like a number, right? God's not something that expands. He doesn't expand like numbers would. Given numbers
He
are
might. I
things.
mean, he might. We don't know, right?
No, because we don't believe that God is like a corporeal thing. That's what I just said.
Like
So
a
like God
materialistic
doesn't.
thing.
Yeah, God's
So
not
he-
material. So
So
he
he's
can't-
somewhere between like spiritual and conceptual, right? Something like that.
No, he's not conceptual. He would be spiritual in the sense that he's immaterial, but he's not like conceptual, like abstract.
Yeah, with leaving on the table all the negative context that I might be trying to use that in. I'm just saying like in like a concept similar, and I'm trying to like draw the line like similar to like numbers, how we think of numbers as a concept. They're he exists outside of this universe, right? Not in our language, not in our.
Yeah, I could say that.
So I guess it helped me understand why you aren't walling off God and saying he's special. Everything else needs to abide by these rules, but God doesn't. Because it just feels
I'm
like
saying
that.
that numbers abide by these rules specifically because they're ever expanding, right? Because they're something that you can literally write down on a piece of paper. That's why that form of infinity is going to be different, because you can literally write out numbers with your hand, but you can't write God out with your hand, right? So that's why God's not going to be like this material thing. So you can't like say God's infinite in the same fashion as numbers, right? Because numbers expand and God doesn't.
I don't think. Yeah, obviously, God is not comparable to numbers in most senses. But I'm just saying, like when we conceptually talk about this, I struggled. There's nothing like God. Like there's nothing to compare him to, right? So when you guys are saying like there's these special cases that God shouldn't be applied, like we shouldn't apply this or that to God. My question is like why? Why
I
not?
just
Why
said
is God special?
because God's incorporeal, but the thing in question is corporeal. That's why you can't.
So you're saying I don't. So if I could just get to you're okay. So let's talk about corporeal then, maybe, or are you guys burnt out on this?
Things that are incorporeal. I mean,
I mean, if you're saying okay, the contention is now that you think maybe what we're saying God is, it's not this like white bearded guy in the sky, but rather it's this like one is a deity, right? That is.
Do you say one? Sorry, you're kind of far away from my again. Do you say oneism deity?
Yeah, I would like not oneism, not the actual, but like you're saying that there's this. When you're trying to define God or describe Him, you're the only thing that we can compare those explanations to and those ideas are other concepts or other spiritual things. So when I compare the affinity line to God, I'm doing it in a very specific context. So when you say, well, you can't write down God, like you can't write down numbers, I know that.
Well, that's not
I
where I
know
was
that you
getting at.
can't
I
write
was
down
just
God.
saying that's not where I was getting at. I was just saying that when you're speaking of numbers, right? The reason that numbers being infinite isn't the same as God being infinite is because numbers are ever expanding. If you were to write numbers down, you could infinitely go, but it's just numbers ever expand. It's kind of like the universe, but God doesn't expand like that. That's why the form of infinity is going to be different.
So I would say there's always been the same amount of numbers that there have ever been. Like there's been no
No,
explanation.
and I would
Expanding of
disagree with
numbers.
that, right? Because if you
So help me
say,
understand, when did numbers get bigger? Like, or help me understand that concept.
well, I believe not. I don't believe numbers were created. I believe numbers are infinite, right? I believe that concepts weren't created. So numbers themselves they've always been expanding, right? I mean, even like the universe, right? You agree the universe is ever expanding, right?
It seems like it, yeah.
So, granting your hypothesis or your theory about numbers not expanding, but they are infinite, you would agree that the universe being infinite is different than numbers being infinite, right? Because one's expanding, one's not.
Yeah, I would.
Okay, so I'm saying that in the same respect of numbers having a different form of infinity than the universe, God also has a different form of infinity than the universe. It's kind of just like not ever expanding, but strict. It's kind of just there.
So why are you saying that? Like, why do you think God has a special thing? Like, why do you think God's special outside of the other
Well, because
ways to look at this?
he doesn't expand. He doesn't have the capacity to expand. Like Buggy said, he's pure act. He's pure actualization. He's simple.
I don't know, and I'm fully willing to admit that if I'm missing things, and maybe it's obvious to people listening, they can just like walk through this. But to me, it feels like there's a huge table of possibilities, like full of possibilities that we could talk about, and it feels like your guys' logic your propositions as we talk through them, you're kind of like dimming the lights on a lot of these like buttons on the table to say that these possibilities aren't possible. When I see realms where some of them could be,
Okay.
and I understand like the logical like guidance that you're doing to wall off things that you think like are just unlikely or in general impossible. But I think that like some of these propositions rest on assumptions or or
Okay.
kind of assumptions. in a way.
What do you want that we said out of the things that we said are impossible? What things do you want justification for? Like, let's go one by one.
I mean, I said
I
God
think-
was pure act. I don't really know how that has anything. Like Moon and I are like, what? I do want you to respond to Buggy's question, but like when I said God's pure act, how come you brought up like us saying that there's like a lot of possibilities on the table or whatever? Like, how does that relate to what I said?
When you said pure act, what?
I'm saying God's pure act. Yeah, that's why
What's
he doesn't have
pure
the
act?
capacity. Yeah, he doesn't have the capacity to expand. He's pure act.
Oh, okay, cool. I haven't heard that word before. New word. Why do I think God should have the capacity to expand, or like why do I think that shouldn't apply, or something?
No, I was just I was just asking how. When I said God's pure act, because you asked like why is it the case?
You're saying
like,
why am I changing the conversation and generalizing again?
yeah, because I was
Okay.
responding to that question. I just said,
Yeah.
well, God doesn't have the capacity to change, and then you said that.
But I guess now I feel like we have to go back to something that you said in the previous. I feel like you're going to say, well, that rests on presumption 5. We can go talk about that if you want. But what I think you're saying right now is that I believe God is X, Y, or Z, and I'm operating under that assumption. I think like that's what you're doing right now, not in like a negative way or anything. I think you're being very.
I believe God has to be pure act, and if God isn't pure act, then he's going to be composed. And if God's composed, there has to be a composer. That's also going to lead to eternal regress as well. So I don't believe that is a possibility. I believe it's an impossibility.
But you're saying like because God, if it's true, if the other side of this is true, then something negative about God happens. Then because of that, I believe the opposite.
Yeah, if you're right about God being infinite in the same respect as the universe, and there's no symmetry breaker there, that means God has a capacity to change, and my God is fake. So yeah,
So why
obviously
don't you think? Like, why do you think God is like infinite, or what's?
I do
what is
believe
the
God's
point?
infinite, but I don't believe he's infinite in the same respect as the universe
Yeah.
because he doesn't have the capacity to expand. He's pure act. He's simple
So
as well.
why do you think God doesn't have the capacity to expand?
Because he's simple. He's not made up of parts.
Can you guess what my next question is going to be?
No. Like,
Why do you
Why?
think that he's simple?
why do I? But yeah, I just answered that because it's an impossibility for him not to be. If God wasn't
So he-
simple, there would be a composer because he's composed.
So basically, you're saying God has to be complex because if he isn't, my
No, not complex.
proposition falls
He has
apart.
to be simple. No.
Yeah, he has to be simple. So, and if he's not simple, my whole proposition falls apart. So he has to be.
No, if he's not simple, that God doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I'm saying why?
Well, I just answered that because if he's composed, there's a composer. That's eternal regress. And Buggy
Yeah,
just
but you're
explained why
saying-
it can't.
Yeah. So, but you're saying it can't be true because it would be not true. Like, why? Why isn't it not true? Help me
Because it's
understand.
eternal regress, and Buggy just gave the argument for why eternal regress is false.
Okay. So you're saying God can't be in that context because it would be eternal regress, and eternal regress is false, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah,
God can't be not simple. God has to be simple.
if he's not
But-
simple, he's composed.
So, and do we agree that eternal regress is possible?
No. I
Okay,
believe
so we
eternal
can't
regress
really
is impossible.
agree. Yeah, but we don't agree that eternal regress is impossible or possible. So we
Didn't you
can't.
disagree with Buggy that eternal regress is impossible?
I said I think that there are sets that do exist, but I don't feel super capable of arguing like on that set proposition yet. And then you came in and we talked about like monster theory and set theory and Russell's thing. Is that what you're talking about?
We did talk about Russell's paradox. Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about right now, though. I'm talking about more of like an absolute divine simplicity type view.
That's what I'm referring to.
I guess I don't think that infinite regress is impossible. And
Bud,
when
you
we
wanna-
talked about that,
Yeah. Okay. So, like, do you affirm the law of non? You affirm that law of non or contradictions can exist. All right. So, if if infinite regresses in a per se causal chain could happen, that would mean that the PSR could be violated because there wouldn't be a sufficient reasoning and grounding as to where the causal powers derive from and those types of things, right? A violation of PSR leads into a violation of the law of non-contradiction. So if you deny PSR, then that means there wouldn't be a rational reason as to why something exists rather than not. So like, for example, there would be no why for X's existence, meaning X exists because it has a cause, grounding, reason why it is rather than isn't. This would mean that existence and non-existence would then both be equally ungrounded, which would make them rationally indistinguishable, which then leads into a violation of the law of non-contradiction, because there would be no rational distinction between is and is not, or what exists and what doesn't exist. Because they're both, like, existence and non-existence are both equally ungrounded and irrational.
Do you accept that argument or no?
I'm trying to think through this. Okay, so I'm trying to draw like the line, like they do in detective movies, in my head, of like the next thing, because what you guys are interpreting is like me just not wanting to be Christian and like hating Christians. What I'm actually doing is I'm trying to be critical of all these things.
That's cool. I don't think you hate Christianity, man. I'm not like assuming that or anything.
I figure you get that a lot. So like people will try to dodge these questions, but the thing is, I've been through like a lot of these conversations with family and friends, and I usually leave them not feeling either understood or understanding, right? And I just don't want to do that here. So you're saying
he's basically just making an argument that eternal regress is an impossibility because it leads to a contradiction, which contradictions can exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like essentially the argument.
So eternal regress always leads to contradiction. Is that true? Do you guys think that's true?
Mm-hmm.
Give me a second to think, you guys. Hold on.
All right.
Yeah. If you want
So-
the P and not P, I can give it to you too.
The P and not P. Is that one of the millennium problems in mathematics? The
No, like
P versus P? Is that what you're
contradiction.
talking about?
A
no,
P and not P is just a contradiction.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Oh, I know it. Yeah, I get the logic premise. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay. I thought you were sorry, I went to school for mathematics, and so I thought you were talking about there's a question that if you answer, you get $1 million. It's called one of the millennium problems, and it's P versus P n or something. Okay, so I mean, I googled infinite regress to just get. So it's, to me, it sounds like one of the only times that I think you're wrong is in mathematics.
Oh,
Do you
I can
guys
grant
think, like,
that. I
maybe-
can grant that. But we're talking about per se causal chains.
Yeah.
So you guys think like, okay, maybe this logic doesn't apply in some circumstances, but
It's
not like
why
a
we
point
put
of
in
per se
the per
causal
se. Yeah.
We're granting
Yeah,
that
that's
it's a
what I'm saying.
possibility in math. I don't think me or Buggy has done research in that, but we're talking about per se causal chain where it's impossible.
I mean, I think I'm inclined to agree with you guys on this. Like, I think mathematics, and it's funny when I googled infinite regress, set theory popped up too, and it seems like those are the only two places other than like in some kind of a cosmic other theory of other world or something that you could have non-contradiction. I think you guys have convinced me. I think I agree with you on this. I think that like set theory and mathematics are the only other two situations, other than fantasy, that have this
Yeah.
infinite regression. Okay, so I mean, you got me on step 3. What, 6 more steps, and I'm a Christian. My mom will be so happy.
Yeah. Okay. So premise. Where is it? Okay. Premise 4 is whatever is not moved by another must have no potentiality. Conclusion 3 is therefore the first mover is pure act.
What's not moved? So everything has to be moved, basically.
Okay. I'll reread it again.
Sorry,
Whatever
you
is not
flipping through
moved by
binders?
another must have no potentiality.
Whatever is not moved by another must not have potentiality.
Yep.
Give that premise again, Buggy. What was that premise?
Whatever is not moved by another must have no potentiality.
That's actually what I was talking about with the composition one. Like,
I'm trying to think of a situation in which like something is moved but has no potentiality for like I don't
everything
know.
is potentiality. That just means like you have the capacity to do something. If you have the potential to do something, then you have like potency or whatever.
I guess in mathematics, the potential is like at the peak of. I guess it just means certain things. So you're saying by potential you mean like the capability of maybe receiving energy or something?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, whatever is not moved by another must not have potential.
Buggy, this is Aquinas' argument, huh?
At the start, like it's based off of it, but then it's like also completely different because I include that the first cause would have to be conscious, pure act, that type of thing.
I guess I mean like does physics agree with this? That would be like the main contention I would have is like does physics agree that like acts don't rely on or that they do rely on like cuz quantum events happen but that would just be like a different causality, right? It would just be smaller or an unperceptible.
Sorry to interrupt
causality.
you, bro. I gotta go though. God bless you, Buggy.
Okay.
God
Good
bless you.
meeting you, man. I'm gonna drop a follow, bro. It was good meeting you, bro. All
Yeah, it was good talking to you, man.
right, God bless you.
If I were to say like there is quantum events that happen, is that just another causality that we can't see or something? Or
I mean, everything would have to be caused. Like I explained how it's impossible for something to move itself. What premise 4 is stating is that like if you're supposed to be this unmoved mover, that you, in order to be unmoved, you couldn't possess potentiality. So, for example, I'll explain why this is the case. So, if something has potentiality, then it can change, and having potentiality tells us that it's not fully what it could be. So, anything that possesses potentiality can't move itself. It's because it's dependent on something else to move it. So, if something is truly unmoved, then it would have no potentiality because if it did, something else would have to move it. So, it would have to be pure act by nature.
when I think about metaphysics, I think that this is pretty consistent. Like I think that this is true almost everywhere. But then there are cases that I want to challenge it on. So one of them would be like the lepton experiment, where they separated a bunch of atoms and they took parts of those atoms and they placed them in different laboratories in different places, and they spun those atoms, and then the atoms in other places without any environmental change started spinning the opposite direction. So it seems like there's some kind of entanglement there that's imperceptible to us, and it would be like godlike on a greater scale.
Well, this wouldn't be the unmoved mover. Like this premise 4 is specifically for the first cause, for the unmoved mover, the starting point.
Yeah, sorry. I'm talking about like what you're saying about the whatever's moved by something must not have potential or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm giving an example of something that's not that has no like that is not connected. I guess I'm trying to figure out if this applies or not consistently on your perspective. So what I'm saying is that there's a lepton in a laboratory with nothing connected to it, and it's spinning. Right. Now, I know the cause.
No, I'm
it's the other
specifically
lepton.
talking about like not in general. I'm specifically talking about when
Yeah.
it comes to the first mover. Like, remember how the first 3 premises determined that there would have to be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else, right? What
Right,
I'm
but
saying
I'm
here is
giving an
if this with this unmoved mover, if it is unmoved or isn't moved by another, it must have no potentiality. So therefore, the first mover is pure act.
So, look, I'm going to give you the challenges, and I want you to try to imagine. And you can tell me where I'm wrong, but try to imagine that these, that you're like. Imagine that I'm trying to agree with you, but these are things that I have serious concerns about. Like we're scientists, really. I think that it seems to me like in quantum events, there are probabilistic outcomes that don't necessarily need to be a causality chain. So it seems to me like philosophers could reject some of these ideas that things need to be like actualized or external, because it could be that there's either an imperceptible like quantum situation going, or I guess we were talking about self-cause, so I won't bring that up again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this isn't what analogous to premise 4. Like if you're addressing or premise 4 have a
It's
problem
easy-
with premise 4, like this wouldn't be an attack on premise 4. Premise 4 is
So you're
just
saying-
when it comes to the first mover specifically, not like just anything.
But you are saying that whatever is not moved by someone must not have potential. So if it's not moved, it doesn't.
No,
have
what I'm
potential,
saying
right?
specifically is with this first mover, which is supposed to be unmoved, if it is to be this unmoved first mover, it couldn't have potentiality.
That's premise 4. I thought it was something about.
Yeah. So when I say premise 4 is whatever is not moved by another must have no potentiality. What I mean by that is with conclusion 2, which is right before it, therefore there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else. That unmoved first mover, if it is unmoved, then it must have no potentiality. Specifically in reference to the unmoved first mover.
If something is moved, it moves from potential to actual. If something is not moved by another, but causes motion, it has to be purely actual.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it would need to be moved by something else. Therefore, something that is unmoved must still move others, first cause or prime mover. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so if it did, what I'm saying is if it did have potentiality, then it couldn't be the unmoved mover because it would need something else to move it.
So one of your claims here is that every single, maybe this is like wrapped up in one of the earlier ones, but that every single like movement has potential.
Yeah, anything that's moves has potential beforehand, or has that potential.
And
ultimately what I'm saying is with premise 4 is that the first mover couldn't have potentiality, because if it did have potentiality, then it would require something to actualize it in order for it to be able to move. So then it's not the true first mover.
Okay, so, man, there's a lot here because what you're saying seems like it might go against. I keep wanting to say that things could self move, but I feel like we've already covered that, right?
Yeah, I can explain it again. So
No, I don't. We don't have to do that. No, that's okay. I feel bad for you because I feel like you have to repeat everything constantly. Because my perception, your conclusion is that whatever is not moved by another must not have potential, and I think it's logically true, but I think it's debatable considering metaphysical scientific perspectives, and I think that there's not necessarily, it's not a contradiction, but a premise that if you accept it, it's a reality you adopt. And so I'm saying that like there are alternate realities that could be true that you're not accepting because you prefer this one. And I don't know how to like get you to talk about that or like get you to engage in that. It feels like
if you're affirming this,
because I think
logically
everything you're saying
true-
could.
Mhm.
I think everything that you're saying could be logically true, and there could also be another set of presumptions that aren't in line with yours that could also all be logically true. And those two things could logically be true and also not, and also like completely contradict each other.
So within this realm of this per se causal chain and what we're talking about, it's not like there's like a million different possibilities. It's either you're affirming that something could move, that's like the unmoved mover could have potentiality, or it couldn't have potentiality, right? There's not like a bunch of different options in between. Kind of like binary, like there's only 0 or 1 as options, right?
But it seems when you go to paint that binary, when you go to like write, you're basically painting the binary choice down, and you're like, this is why it has to be one or the other. When it feels like a bunch of the issues that you're noting could be, and it feels like you're walling them off because it's better for like when you were saying earlier that God couldn't be regressive, so therefore it has to be the other option because God can't be regressive. It just can't happen.
No, like it's either there can be an infinite regress in a per se causal chain, or there can't be.
But I don't agree with that. Like I you know what? I think I do agree with that now. I think I did concede to that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's like the law of excluded middle, right? Like it's either for any proposition P, it's either P is true or P is not true. Like here, it's either true that something, the first mover, can have potentiality, or it's either not true that the first mover can't have potentiality.
So I've heard of Aquinas' argument. This is the Aristotle and Aquinas argument, right?
The first like 2 premises or 3 premises were ultimately here. I'll explain the logic. The point of the first mover, right? Obviously, it can't be an infinite regress. Like you're affirming that now. If the first cause were to have potentiality, then that potential would need an explanation, so it doesn't violate PSR, right? Which would mean that the first cause isn't fully actual, or the first cause, or it's not the first cause, since like the fully actualized first cause would have to be self-explanatory and isn't dependent on something else to ground it, because there can't be an infinite regress. So this ultimately, there can't be an infinite regress of explanations, so there would ultimately need to be an explanation and grounding that is fully actualized, since to be fully actual means you would have no external cause, potential, and would be self-explanatory, right? So that would just be saying that would just be moving back to first mover, but there still would need to be a first mover.
Do you, when I guess just as a point of criticism, when you say like God is a pure act, he's like, when I say it feels like that's not founded properly, or do you get what I'm pointing at?
Like you want a grounding as to why God would have to be pure act?
Not necessarily, but to me it feels like you're giving God a pass and you're making everyone else explain what they mean. But it feels like with I don't know. I've never even heard pure act. I'm assuming like actuality is probably what that means. Pure
It means
actuality.
fully actualized, like you have no potential.
Pure act. Okay, yeah. I like that. I like that way of saying it. It's like a new age kind of way. Like, but to me, it feels like you're presuming things there.
Yeah,
in
I
a
can
way.
justify why why it would have to be the case, if you want.
Is it through an abstract? Like, are you going to say? Well, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so like I just said, if it were to have obviously we affirm now that there can't be an infinite regress, right? So if it
Yeah, I
were
agree.
to have potentiality, then since PSR can't be violated, there would need to be an explanation and grounding for that, right? To be fully actualized would mean that you are self-explanatory, so you explain yourself, so you don't need another external explanation. You're not you don't have potentiality, there's no external cause for you, right? So if you're positing that the first cause could have potentiality, or the reason why it couldn't is because then there would need to be an explanation, and ultimately, since there can't be an infinite regress explanation, there would need to be a final or ending explanation that is fully actualized, because you would need to be fully actualized in order to be self-explanatory and to not have an external cause or reasoning, right? So that would just end up
Wait.
being the first cause.
So hypothetically, if I agreed with all of your premises, and then after we agree, I go back and I say, but it still does seem like you're saying, hey, because my whole psychological, like my premises don't work if God has a cause, I'm just gonna say he doesn't. Like, do you understand? There seems to be something there.
No, so there's reasonings as to why there couldn't be God couldn't be a cause. Like we already affirmed that there can't be an infinite regress. So in order for since due to that impossibility, there would need to be an ultimate explanation and grounding that by nature was self-explanatory, didn't require another grounding or explanation, right? Which a requirement of that would be to be fully actualized, because then you would be self-explanatory. There wouldn't need to be an explanation as to why you have potential, etc., or you wouldn't be dependent on external causes.
Yeah, again, like say I agree with all of those premises though, but what I'm saying is that when you get to the point where you're going to say, is God like what you're saying is that because the shoe doesn't fit, God couldn't have worn it, right?
What do you mean?
Like what you're saying is that because like if there's for sure an unmoved mover, then therefore that unmoved mover couldn't be this way. Like you're saying there's an impossibility. There's a square. There's a shape with 3 and 4 sides if you try to go this direction. That's what you're saying, right? It's impossible in such a way that we can exclude it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that when you're talking about it, the evidence for that presumption falls short. And in fact, that you should still consider God is infinitely regressing, not because he can't be, but rather because we're opening the door to like cosmic possibility here. And so we can't use like statistical like reasoning or like, because we don't know what can or can't happen. So we can't operate in the means of what can or can't. There's stuff that seems to be more impossible, like a 3-sided square, things that really can't happen. But I'm saying it feels like the evidence you're presenting falls short to.
Well,
to hit that
Yeah,
target.
it's grounded like objectively, right? Like the infinite, if there could be potentiality, then ultimately that wouldn't be the first cause, and once again there would be an infinite regress, which I explained why it's like impossible for there to be an infinite regress in a per se causal chain, or an infinite regress of explanations, right? Because then it denies PSR, and the denial of PSR violates the law of non-contradiction, and contradictions can exist.
But we're categorizing God and we're categorizing the world, and we're front loading a lot of these concepts so that we can taxonomy this into a philosophical conversation. Like the earth, this is all made up. Like language is made up. We're just trying to categorize it properly. So these logical propositions that you're putting forth, I think they don't take into account the realities of like that. For example, a cosmic event could happen, and it makes a researcher think something is happening when he's completely wrong about that thing.
Well,
And so there's-
yeah. So what I'm grounding this on isn't like, what we like, just isn't based on just what we observe or anything like that. It's ultimately what, like for example, the explanation I just gave you is grounded on something objective, right? A self-evident truth, that being the laws of logic, specifically the law of non-contradiction. Its denial requires it to be true. Which is like a performative contradiction, right? It's grounded on stuff that's objective. It's not based on like subjective observations or like, oh, well, we see it this way, so then it's like, it must be that way. It's not that sort of thing.
So you're saying since we already covered the infinite, I won't keep bringing it up. But you're saying like God as a pure being or is. So I guess I'm saying you could argue that that the abstract medical construct doesn't like seem like a deity like that you could worship. I guess maybe.
What?
Like, you could argue that like this pure act is unreachable or like impossible, more so.
I mean,
Like when you're arguing for this pure act, what does pure act mean? Pure act,
like fully actualized,
like
no potentiality. So like, it's the maximums, like being all powerful, all good, etc. There's no improvement that could be made.
so. But like, why do you think? Like, how did I guess I feel? How did we even get there? How did we get to that God is or? Man, we've been talking for a long time. So we're saying that God is the mover. I don't even think we've gotten to God yet, actually, did we?
Mhm.
We're saying that there's an unmoved mover, that exists. Did we? Is that this premise, or is that one of the previous ones?
The unmoved mover was established after the third premise, the infinite regressing. And now we're arguing for why it'd have to be pure act, which would be the fourth premise. And the conclusion theory.
Yeah, I guess I'm like probably caught a little bit between 3 and 4, which is that like it could be, from my perspective, it could be 2 gods or it could be 3. Like I don't even know why we would put it down to 1.
No, that'd be a problem with pure act.
Yeah.
Well, that's the next premise, right? Because we're saying if I go back to 3, you're saying that there has to be an unmoved mover, right? And I would say like,
Yes,
I don't
but if
know
you were
why.
to say you can't have multiple unmoved movers.
Yeah, so like you could affirm, I guess, if the argument was just like the first 3 premises and conclusion 1 and 2, that the first mover could be like 2 beings, but then that gets debunked later on when it comes to pure act.
So can we go there? That like say there's a race of gods. Why can't there be like a race of them? It has to be
Yeah,
one
so
guy.
like as I explained with like how the first mover, if it had potentiality, is an infinite regress, right? It would have to be pure act, meaning it's fully actualized. It has the omni attributes, being all powerful, etc. If let's just say there was just 2 beings that were pure act, that couldn't happen because they would both be all powerful, all perfect, etc., which would be like contradictory, right? Because
Why do they need to be pure actual?
because if they didn't, they would have potentiality, which would then lead into there needing to be an explanation for that potentiality. And since there can't be an infinite regress of explanations, there'd need to be an ultimate explanation that doesn't require an external explanation. So it'd have to be self-explanatory, which means it would be fully actual, because if it had potential, then there would need to be an explanation for that potential. You know what I mean?
When you do that, you gish gal me a little bit where I can't catch up.
Sure.
Because I don't live in this world, so I don't use these words as much. So like when you're saying actual and potential, I have to like mentally translate for a second whenever you do that to like, okay, that means like motion and activity and like. So when you said all that, I caught some of it, but what I think you're saying is that a lot of these things just can't be applied to God, because if they were applied to God, the logic system wouldn't work as a whole.
What I would say that if they were applied to God, then qua PSR, right? That potentiality would need an explanation. And since like you and I both agree that there can't be an infinite regress here, there would have to be an ultimate grounding explanation, that one that doesn't require an external explanation. And in order for that to occur, you'd have to be self-explanatory, right? Because if you weren't self-explanatory, couldn't explain yourself, then something else would have to explain you, and we keep going back, right? An aspect of that.
Wait, hold on. So you said, sorry, okay. So there can't be a race of gods, because if there were multiple of that deity, they couldn't both be actualized, because that would create a recursion event.
Yeah, they
right?
couldn't both be fully actualized, because an aspect of fully actualized is being all powerful, right? If there's
Okay,
two
so maybe
beings that are
that's where we
supposedly
disagree.
all powerful, like it can't happen.
Yeah, like maybe I don't know, because yeah, like logically, it doesn't make sense that two things could be all powerful at the same time. So I guess for my analogy to work, I would have to lessen the power of a deity or something.
But then ultimately, then they wouldn't be the first cause. There would still ultimately be one first cause.
So why does the first cause thing have to be like the super being? Like why can't it not be all?
Because if it had potential, then it would need an explanation. And since there can't be an infinite regress to explanations, there would have to be an explanation that grounds itself, which means it wouldn't require an explanation. So that means it would have to have no potentiality, because if it had potentiality, then it would need an explanation.
Okay, all right, wait. So slower, just slower. I can get it if you go slower.
Yeah.
But you're saying there can't be two beings because it would necessarily make them all powerful, and if the initial mover isn't all powerful, why can't the initial mover like not be all powerful?
Then because it would have potentiality.
So why is that? Why would you have potentiality if you aren't all knowing?
Yeah, so potentiality, if something has potential, it means it can improve or get better, right? Whether a potential is achieved or not doesn't matter. Like, we have the potential to be all omnipotent, right? Whether we achieve that or not doesn't matter, it still exists, right? So if it weren't all powerful, it would have the potential to become all powerful, right? Which then
If it's not all powerful, it could become all powerful, and that the indication of change means it can't be.
it could
the
become all
deity or
powerful,
something.
which means that's like potential right there. So since it has potential, there would need to be an explanation for that potential, since it's not self-explanatory.
Is it necessarily true that if a deity wasn't all powerful, it could become all powerful or have change? Is it necessarily true that non all powerful creation has change?
No,
because if it were to change,
I guess that's something I would have to think.
if it were to
about
change,
too.
it would have to either move itself or be moved by another. So it would either be, it would either way it's going to have potentiality. If it's being moved by another, then it's not the first cause definitionally, and we're just at a different point in the chain than we think we are. Or if it's moving itself, then that just violates the law of non-contradiction.
yeah.
See, if you were right about like 90% of things, but you were wrong about there being a god or something like that, I think I could follow this in that, like, okay, maybe there's a race of deities beyond us that are that are like
What's
almost
this is
all-knowing,
going
and
back
they
to
have
what
their
I
own
was
deity.
talking about with you, where it's like, your contentions aren't about like the argument's validity or stuff like that. It's like I feel like your contention is that if you do affirm the argument and do affirm that they logically follow, then that means that there would be a God that exists, and you would be more comfortable if it wasn't a God that exists, but maybe like a race of deities or something else, right? Which isn't really logically valid. It's just like just not wanting. It would be just ignorance at that point. Like I just don't want to affirm this because I don't want to believe in its conclusion, versus addressing whether the argument itself is valid and logically follows.
Yeah, I think I'm being pretty honest. I'm trying to, but I don't think that these things follow. Like, and when I test them logically, there are criticisms that I have, and then when I talk to you, like we get to the bottom of it eventually. But it seems to me like you do this a lot. So when you say it, you're like you're rolling your eyes and you're saying, "I've said this 1,000 times. It's just another guy have to say this too." And so I have to parse that all through and try to make sense of it. And it takes me a little bit of time because I'm just not as studied in this as you, but I'm trying to engage. I think that there's the possibility that you're wrong about all of these things, but I also am taking in that there's the possibility that I'm wrong, and I'm trying to be open to that. So when you say that I could be being ignorant if I'm not, or whatever you just said, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. It's not that I see where these arguments lead and I don't want to validate that, but it's rather that I think that you maybe are ignoring things that are important to validate what you already believe.
I feel like that doesn't go with what you said, because you specifically said you'd be more comfortable if it led to like a race of deities, right? You'd be more comfortable with affirming the argument if it leads to a race of deities.
Because you're saying it has to be one guy, and that and I don't understand why it would be this unified creator.
Because of the premise that
like,
includes the argument for pure act.
Yeah.
But I'm saying there's no reason to assume that. Like, it seems like
We're not
could be a
assuming
race
it's
of deities.
deduced.
Yeah, but I'm saying it could be the case that it's a race of deities who are non-perfect, and they have a deity that we could be in the wrong space of the chain. Like you were saying, is it?
Sounds like you're making an argument for angels, which I'm
Maybe.
totally on board with.
Yeah, so maybe, but in this case, maybe angels created us, and God is an angel in his own right, and there is a greater system of religion, a greater deity that created him, and so like, why isn't it? Seems like that possibility is off the table for you guys.
Because that was already included under the per se causal chain.
Like you could affirm that there's like little deities, but as ultimately there would have to be a first mover that's fully actualized.
But so you're saying, okay, are you saying to me, oh, okay, sure, you know what, well, fine, that's possible, but that just means that God is somewhere down the chain, and it just might not be the one that we're talking about.
It's logically possible that it's not logically impossible that there could be some kind of metaphysical being higher than human beings and lower than the one true God. But whether or not that actually is the case is different. And irrespective of that, there's still going to be one first cause.
Yeah.
So if we're not going to have a disagreement about whether there is one purely actual first cause, I don't know why we would have a side quest to find out who these
mythical creatures are.
Yeah, I think that the reason you would have a side quest to investigate like mythical creatures is if the presumptions that you're putting forth about the mythical creature that you do think exists is they don't follow with like other situations. I think that's like a good way to tell if you're being logically consistent.
The logical consistency is guaranteed by the form of the argument.
Yeah, the validity of the argument. If it's logically inconsistent, that means like it would violate the laws of logic or metaphysical principles and those types of things.
So when I say that like the God that you're kind of presuming here is when I say that it's possible that it could be a part of a greater race and that that God serves a greater God. Like, help me understand the special.
There would have to be an ultimate God that's fully actualized.
Yes, but it could, but it might not be the one that you serve. Or
That's fine.
Right?
I'm not arguing for a specific God. I'm arguing that by necessity there has to be a fully actualized conscious first mover. So if you're saying yes, that can be the case, or that's the case, then whether it's like Greek
If you're not
gods or
going to
whatever. It
admit
doesn't
that
matter.
there is if you're not going to admit the final conclusion, and you're going to say,
No,
well,
I'm
you
not
don't
going
know
to
which
admit.
one it is.
You're not going to admit?
Yeah.
What do you mean I'm not going to admit something?
Yeah, if you're not going to admit the conclusion logically follows from the premises,
Okay. I mean, I'm not. I think that this has been a good conversation so far, but if it's like preaching and I have to admit truth and like you decide what's true, I don't.
No, like
I'm
if
good.
you're
well,
if
no. I'm not telling you have to admit something because I want you to admit it. I'm telling you that there's an argument here that Bug and I make.
Essentially what he's saying is that we're making an argument, and if you're not going to, like, these side quests you're going on are just irrelevant, right? It's about addressing the argument itself. If you affirm the argument, then that's fine. Like, if you're affirming that there's a fully actualized conscious God or first mover, that's fine. Then that's the point of the argument. The argument isn't based on whether, like, okay, well, does this God have like lesser gods like Thor and those types of
Right.
stuff that do deeds for him? It's just specifically not on a specific God, but just specifically that there is a fully conscious or fully actualized first mover.
This is like
Just
going
something to
outside and
note,
seeing that
and
this is like going outside and seeing that the pavement is wet, and instead of concluding that it rained, that, well, it's logically possible that there was a giant tsunami that just railed through here 20 minutes ago. Like, yes, it's logically possible, but that possibility is not going to be entertained.
Do you see what we're saying, man?
It sounds like you're saying, okay, we want to talk about possibility, but it's notable to us to talk about probability within the possibilities. Is that what you're saying, basically?
You're bringing up okay. The point of the argument is whether there's like lesser gods or stuff like Thor or Odin or whatever that do his bidding. It doesn't matter. The purpose of the argument is to argue that a fully actualized conscious first mover exists by necessity. So you bringing up like this a divine deity race or whatever is completely irrelevant to the argument.
So in my perception, what you're asserting is a god that created the world and who's like all knowing, and you're saying the buck stops there, and I'm saying it's possible that that creator that you're talking about has its own creator, and there could be like a first mover. That's possible, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the god that you serve or the most recent
I'm not
link
arguing
in the
for
chain,
like
right?
the Christian God or the Muslim God or anything like that. I'm just arguing that if this conscious, fully actualized first mover exists by necessity.
Does everything have to be from? I guess the other part of the contention is that you're like limiting it to one. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that you're saying that there's this one in cause that everything came from, whereas it could be that there are two or four or
Okay,
eight.
yeah.
Right?
So
It's-
if there's two like fully like pure act beings, right? It would be contradictory. Like there would be either no real distinction between them, since distinctions would require some differentiating features, i.e., since they're both fully actualized, no potential, the only possible differentiation is one being lesser or having some potential, which then means it's not the first mover. So right there can't be two pure act beings or more than one pure act being, because any
Right, like you said-
differentiation.
You can't take the conclusion and say, well, there could not be one first act one because there could be lower ones. I mean, if you want to say that there are lower ones, cool, we'll admit that. But like, and when I said admit, by the way, I'm just saying that admit that the conclusion follows from the premises logically. Not that anybody's preaching here. This is very dry to be preaching. But
yeah, okay.
if you were to say it, like, no, if I went into church and I heard this, bro, I would fall asleep. I would just walk out, honestly. But
Yeah, I am interested. I would love this if this is a church was honestly.
I'm not gonna lie, bro. If Father gets up there and he starts talking about this, I'm just gonna be like, ooh, I'm just gonna start booing, bro. But
If you could yell back,
So-
though, it might be more entertaining, right?
yeah, well, heckling during sermons would probably be a good way for me to not get to commune 10 minutes after that. So, but if you want to say that there are lower ones, we'll admit that that's a logical possibility. Whether that actually is the case, we would rather leave aside for a different conversation. But the question of whether or not there's one pure X being is not something I think we can really contend with, because if we admit that the being is pure X in question, there's not going to be more than one of those, numerically one of them, because that would
Yeah.
involve a contradiction in the definition.
Yeah, I've noticed a pattern, and I think like my main contention with all of these is that when you guys make these propositions or whatever you call it,
Yeah, proposition.
yeah, you know, but the it feels like when you hit your conclusion and I say something like this, like, well, it's possible that there's all these other things here. It seems like these propositions necessarily rope off real possibilities. And so what I'm saying
No,
is
we're
like,
not roping.
hey, I know you
We're
don't
not
want to
roping at all.
explore this. I know that you don't want to explore this right now because maybe it like goes down a bunch of trails you've already walked down and you know how it ends. And maybe you're right. Maybe this doesn't lead anywhere. But it seems like we're not presumptions. The propositions are ignorant of the possibility, right? They just leave off for the possibility. So it's fine. Like, and I agree with
So-
what you're saying about the minor gods or whatever. I don't care too much about that point. But I'm just trying to like show that these propositions aren't as like I don't know biblical
So
or
the
I don't know
reason,
what you
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example that it might help clear this up. If I were to say that there were a bunch of vice presidents for a particular company, and then I were to make an argument that if there's a vice president, based on the definition of vice president, there must be a president of the company, and you were to retort by saying, well, maybe there's multiple presidents that kind of like are assistants to the one big president. Do you see what the problem is there? What you've essentially done is you just redefined president to mean vice president and gone backwards. And you've gone from saying like, you've gone from talking about the original thing and you just recreated the exact same system, except you said that it was one step further back than it actually is. I mean, if you call the
Yeah.
apple 10 oranges, when I've already admitted that there could be 10 oranges, that doesn't make any sense. It's better for you to just admit that there's one apple and there could be 10 oranges. Let's stop
So-
talking about the oranges or the lesser deities or the vice presidents. Let's just talk about the apple, the one thing at the top of that. We're
So
ignoring the lower possibilities because they are logically possible. Everybody admits that. But the one final cause, there's going to be something that it terminates it.
So in using your analogy, what it feels like is we're talking about who is in charge at this company. We're saying let's figure out who's in charge, and you're saying it's obviously the guy that's the president. And I'm saying, well, what if there's a parent company and that guy's actually in charge?
No, so that's not. The purpose isn't who's in charge. Essentially, what you're doing is saying like, I'm showing that this has to be like a fully actualized being, and you're basically affirming that. But instead, you're saying, okay, but what if there's this other being that's before it, and that being actually would just end up being the fully actualized being? So it's just pushing it back, but then you're just affirming the same thing that I'm saying.
Yeah, it's like if I said, who's the person ultimately in charge of the entire company and everyone underneath them? And I say, oh, it's this guy. And then you say, well, what if he has somebody over him? Then he definitionally wouldn't be the guy in charge of everybody.
Yeah,
'cause he
but
has somebody in
ultimately
charge
there
of
would
him.
still need to be someone in charge of the company.
So
That's
you're
all
saying
you do.
you're talking about the system, and I'm talking about the concept or the people in.
Well,
the
no,
system
I'm
or
saying that
something.
if you want to say, let's say there's that person X is, if I say person X is in charge of every single person on the planet, and then you say, well, maybe the president's in charge of him. That doesn't make any sense if we admit that he's the person in charge of everybody. If you want, and if you say, okay, well, if maybe there's somebody who's in charge of him, okay, then that person is. And if you say there's somebody in charge of him, we're just moving the definition to a different person. But ultimately, that definition is going to fall on somebody, and the
Yeah.
definition who that falls on, the predicate that falls on, that's who we're talking about. We need to stop talking about whether or not there could be somebody above this person, because if you, like, do you admit that there's one person ultimately who's going to be in charge of everybody in this analogy?
I'm open to it. I'm like still struggling with why there couldn't be more than one.
Yeah. So
Because they wouldn't
Well,
be in
open to
charge of everybody.
yeah, like as like
Because they would
Well,
be
yeah.
equal. Right.
But they also don't fit the person, like the concept of person that you're talking about. They wouldn't fit into that anyway. They'd be outside of it because because another part of this that I think you guys are going to eventually make is a case of special pleading for God, which is that God doesn't fall into this system. But I think that like
He follows the system.
this falls into
Like,
as
there's
saying,
not-
but
There's not a so special pleading would be if there's an exception made to a rule without like a logical justification, reasoning, or grounding. There isn't just
Yeah.
a random exception to the rules we're bringing up without a logical reason, justification, or grounding.
So you're saying that God necessarily doesn't fall into these rules, because if he did, then the whole proposition couldn't function overall.
Then the rules would be above him, which would be a problem in the very definition of the thing. That's like if I were to say that the most powerful thing in the world is, or the most powerful thing that you could possibly conceive of is limited by something else, then it wouldn't be the most powerful thing I can conceive of. It would be one underneath that.
Yeah.
It'd be a contradiction in definition, so
yeah.
it wouldn't be permitted.
Ultimately, the rules are pointing towards there needing to be a first cause that's fully actualized. So then just saying that it's not an exception to the rule, that's just what the rules are telling us, or logically following or ending up at.
So I like our foundation that we both probably agree on outside of the proposition is that the universe requires a creator there and or creation, and so there needs to be a first cause of the universe.
Hmm?
I mean, so it seems like it seems like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you're saying a set of things, which is that the first cause explains why everything exists. The universe began at that cause, and everything must have a cause. Therefore, and it feels like I'm saying the universe could be like eternal or self-contained, and that not everything needs a cause.
Even if if you affirmed like the universe is eternal, whatever, ultimately there still needs to be a fully actualized first cause, but like conscious first cause. That's what the argument argues for. Whether what you want to call that doesn't matter. Like, what if you want to call that Allah, that's fine. If you want to call it Bob, I could care less. That ultimately the argument's arguing for this thing, not like the name or what you call it.
I guess there's
If the
this other
universe
thing
is
that
also,
happens
like-
sometimes in science where it's just like a brute fact, right? Of just like something that doesn't need explanation.
It can't be brute.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up. I mean, if we're going to admit brute facts into the conversation, then I'm just going to assert my entire religion is a brute fact.
Yeah, that's true. I guess but we couldn't do it through like assertion. It would have to be through like probably observational science or something.
Well, then it wouldn't
You
be a
could-
brute fact because it depends on something. It depends on observation or something else for its truth value. If it's deduced
And
from something else, then it's not a brute fact.
Are you saying that like brute fact means like necessarily true?
So no,
or
a
something?
brute fact is essentially like something that is just that you're claiming or saying is true without any justified reason or explanation. So for example, a brute fact would be me just saying Christianity is true, and then I have no justification, reasoning, or grounding as to why this is the case.
Okay, so brute facts were explained to me a little differently. Although I totally admit, like, I don't want to use it this way because I don't like this. But from my point of view, brute facts were established as like how nature interacts with itself or something. I could probably Google exactly what I'm talking about, but
I don't think that would really be the definition of a brute fact.
It is a fact that
I did-
simply is without a further reasoning or explanation. It just is.
The only thing that and by the way, if you were to conceive of something, we would just say that if you were to be able to conceive of something that was a brute fact, that there would only be really one of those because they would all share some kind of common predicate. And if we were to say that, well, it just is, that common predicate of being kind of just leads you back to something which is pure being anyways, which is exactly what we're talking about. So even if you admit the brute fact, then it's still going to, if you have multiple brute facts, then you also have a problem.
Well, you get that we're using the word brute fact, and it doesn't sound like we're talking about the same thing. You guys see that, right?
Yes.
Well, because no offense, I think we are using the term brute fact in the sense that actually means brute fact, and I think you're talking about something different.
Yeah, I mean, on Wikipedia,
That's fine, but we just want to know what you're talking about. We just want to make sure we know
yeah, on
what you're
Wikipedia,
saying.
I looked it up. There's a couple different definitions. I was talking more about like how science interacts with itself, like how conventional nature. Well, I'll just read you the definition. It says on Wikipedia, but it's to be argued that there are many several descriptions of the same fact, but they're constrained by the question of nature. I don't know. This actually seems
Yeah,
like
so a brute fact
fucking
like
side.
is a fact that simply is, like, without further reasoning or explanation. I just pulled it up.
There's also different types of brute facts as well. There's like primitive brute facts, like others.
Okay. So
I was thinking about how like water fills or like earlier we were talking about necessarily a square can't be like a circle or like have X amount of sides, like definitionally or something like that. I was thinking more in the context of like a square has four sides and that's like a brute fact, right? It's like based on its description or something like that. Well, I think I got confused about observational science. I don't want to waste time on it because I feel like I'm just making you repeat yourself over and over again anyway. But okay, so we're down to that. I don't think there's necessarily a first cause, and you guys do think there's necessarily a first cause, and the reason for that being that, like, I don't know, you guys feel that infinite regress is never possible. I'm open to it being possible, but I think I agree with you.
okay.
But I want to leave room for that because I do like there's something there. There's like
It's what we would call a
There's concepts-
metaphysical impossibility. Like, if you affirm an infinite regress can occur within, like, a per se causal chain, would violate PSR, which can't be violated because a violation of PSR would lead into a contradiction or would violate the law of non-contradiction. It's what we call a metaphysical impossibility. We also say it leads into a logical impossibility because it violates the law of logic.
Yeah, it's metaphysically
think-
impossible because it's also logically impossible. It flows from those two things because if you can't have a square circle, then it's also metaphysically impossible for that to exist. If it's going to be logically impossible for it to exist, then it's also metaphysically impossible.
Okay, so are you saying that like, so with the circle square thing, are you saying that like you're just saying infinite regress is like that? It's necessarily not possible. It's like having
a metaphysical impossibility.
It's like being in two places at once or something.
Yeah. It leads to that.
I see problems with this, but it feels like such a big conversation, and like so I feel like we'd need whiteboards to communicate about these kinds of concepts to each other because we could talk about like multiverse theory, but I don't really believe in any of that. It just feels like a challenge to you for no reason. And I know that there's
We agree with
there's
that.
like there's like a time you can mess with time here too. There's like a time
theory
thing.
and B theory of time.
No, I'm coming straight off the dome, man. I don't know what the theories are, but I'm just saying like time.
Yeah.
There's like some weird stuff going on with time where you talk about like the beginning and end of time, and that it's not infinite or it is.
Yeah.
Buggy, you hold to A theory, right?
Yeah.
I think most Christians do, yeah.
I mean, you kind of have to hold to both in some sense, but yeah.
What do you... No, you have to reject B theory if you're Christian.
I'll explain later.
Oh, okay.
Not in front of the atheist.
No,
I mean,
this
if you were to
is-
affirm that
yeah,
something
this
is,
a different
if you were to affirm
conversation.
that something is B theory, for example, you can say that Christ is the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world, and that's equally
Yeah.
true at all times.
Or you could affirm that, for example, like, I know some theologians affirm that God being eternal means that he sees all the time at once as equally real. So, like, for God, it would be, B theory would be true.
Nobody really disagrees that from our perspective, time is linear.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's a question of perspective, not really like. I don't even think the two things are like necessarily contradictory. It's just that it depends on the perspective of the observer.
Anyways, back to the
You're
actual
s-
topic.
Wait, you're saying that time? You're saying that no one disagrees that time isn't linear? Is that right?
It is linear for us.
No,
For
like,
us.
It
as
is
we
linear for us.
experience. Yeah, as we experience.
But probably
We can't.
not for,
I can't
like,
go
other
back to
things,
5
right?
seconds ago.
Yeah.
But do we think that, just as a collective, do you guys think that it's probably not linear for other beings, or whether you believe in multiple or just one other beings?
No, I don't think time for God is linear.
Do you think that he can see like yesterday and today in the same context, like
God can?
all at once? Yeah, you think that's how it works for him?
Yeah, like it's
Well, I
just
think that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and always. I don't think that he changes, and I don't think he moves through time as a being through space of some manner like that.
yeah. Some philosophers like lead into B theory of time for God's eternity. Like, I know
Are you guys all
Aquinas did.
Catholic?
No, we're Orthodox.
Or yeah, if you're not like, I feel like if you're not the New Age Christianity, I feel like it completely lacks all of this research.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And so it feels like almost like only people based in like the like closer, and I'm not trying to generalize you too much, but like all the denominations that are very close to the split of the Catholic Church seem to do a lot of research, and all the New Agey ones don't seem to do any research.
Yeah, well, we agree on that, but that's a problem with Protestantism more than it's a problem with like Christianity or the method in question, the method at all.
I mean, we can also agree that maybe it's a problem with atheism too. Right?
Getting back on topic, like, do you see how the first mover would have to be pure act?
Maybe.
Do I think that the first mover should be purely actualized? It seems like, would you say the Big Bang falls into the same context? Like, is this just the Big Bang like a cope for what a god is, and they just don't want to give God a lot of credit?
I hold to the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, it's like
Or God's tool, maybe? Is that what you're saying?
you could affirm that it's God's tool. It doesn't really matter for the argument. We're just arguing for a fully actualized conscious first mover that exists by necessity. Whether the way he created it doesn't matter.
I guess the insinuation of like consciousness too feels weird. Like, where are we getting all of these descriptors of like one God and like conscious God and like?
Yeah. Like, do you want to get in? Like, the consciousness aspect is the next part of the argumentation. If you affirm that the pure act, then that would be what's next.
All right, man. Look, I'm burning out here, so I think I'm gonna go.
Okay.
But I
appreciate you for coming up.
appreciate you guys. No, I really do. I have to say, willingly engaging, even though you didn't get me where you wanted to be, and like even though I didn't always follow your trains of thoughts like you wanted me to. I really appreciate like your demeanor. All of you guys, actually.
Yeah, bro. It was good talking to you, man.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Yeah,
Good luck. Hope you make some Christians.
May the glorious Romanides protect you.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
That's
Yep.
crazy inside ball. Crazy inside ball right
Okay.
there.
Bring up that wild pack guy.
Wild, do you want to come up? All right, we'll see. I invited you up, Wildback.
Siv, are you a Romanides venerator too?
What even is Roman 80s? Is that you?
It's some like random philosopher that died in like 2001 that was Orthodox.
2001?
Crazy.
I
things.
wonder what happened in 2001 that he could have died.
Oh, you don't tell you. I'm gonna get banned on TikTok, bro.
Romanides did it, guys. Romanides did it.
TikTok. I did not affirm that. I did not affirm that.
This guy, bro.
This guy, bro.
What's up, Wildpack?
Oh, that's fun.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys give me just 2 minutes to get to my car really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm.
No problem.
Cool, I'll be right back. I'm just gonna mute myself. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Roman 80s did.
Hey, bro, steel beams don't melt on their own unless you got a Romanides engineer up there messing with them, bro.
Yeah. Someone a while ago on the stream, TikTok stream, was talking about had like a problem with the works-based salvation. The works-based salvation is explicitly biblical, as laid out in James 2:14 through 26. With what you brought up, if I remember correctly, because I can't find the comment, I believe you brought up Matthew 7:22. This isn't a problem at all when it talks about like, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you, depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. This is just another aspect of faith, right? Like true faith isn't just works. We're not saved just because we do good things. An aspect of true faith is having a relationship, right? An aspect of that is works and those types of things. There's many different aspects. What we see here demonstrated in Matthew 7 is just doing works and not having that true relationship and those types of things. So that's why he says, I never knew you. So it's not just purely works. So it's not, this doesn't attack the idea of like a works-based salvation. We're saved by faith, but true faith requires works, or like an aspect of that is works. Obviously not exhaustively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you believe that it's actually possible to separate works from faith, then you either A, believe you don't have to do anything whatsoever except mentally believe, which is still kind of a work on your part unless you believe God forces you to, or you do believe in works-based salvation.
Yeah.
So if you want to separate those two, you're going to have a contradiction one of two ways, unless you just admit that they're both two sides of the same coin, in which case that's just what we believe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you're the Trinity. We would the Trinity. Like I'm sure you've heard it a million times. We would affirm that it's one essence, one ousia, fully and equally in three distinct persons or hypostases. Right. This one ousia is the one being of God. It's infinite. It's not divided or separated, and it subsists in the three persons, fully and equally, right? The reason as to, for example, like this is one God versus three is because there is only one being of God, and it's not like each hypostasis has their own ousia. It's the same one being or one ousia that subsists fully and equally in the three hypostases, and this is possible because it is infinite.
Yeah. Also, I was gonna say, in that case, also, baptism would be a work, unless
In what
God's like,
case?
forcing you.
In which case?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we're defining like based off of James 2, right, where it's basically saying that faith is nothing without works, or whatever, or works is nothing without faith, whatever. Like you could say that baptism would be a work, and I know a lot of Protestants try to beat around the fact that works don't get you into heaven, it's just by faith alone. But I was just saying, like, if you define works as just like if you define it a certain way, you could basically get to the fact that baptism is
Right. I mean, well, and the thing is too is that like I don't know, Bug. I think there's a way of explaining it where you can just kind of make an essence energies distinction argument for faith and works. I mean, faith is the substance of all works, and a work is just faith operating. They're not like two separate things.
Yeah. Sarlacc.
And by the way, when they say that baptism is a work, I mean, yeah, it's a work, but it's not one of ours. Baptism is literally like monoenergistic. It literally we have no part in the act of baptism. It is entirely Christ who baptizes.
Yep.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Appreciate you bringing me on. I know I waited for a while there. It was a really good discussion.
Good twin.
Of course.
Yeah. Just so you guys know, do you guys mind if I give you just a little bit of my background before I give you some of my questions, just so you know I'm coming to this in good faith?
If you want to, sure.
Yeah, I am a Protestant brother. Grew up in a non-denominational Assemblies of God setting. I no longer identify with non-denominational slash evangelical denominations. I think that it's rife with issues. I've been on a very long, I'd say 3 to 4 year journey now of just studying church history and doctrine, reading the early church fathers to kind of get a better understanding of the history of the faith and what did the early church fathers believe, so I can practice the faith in the way that the apostles did it, not in a 19th century Campbellian restorationist way, but like in a just I want to live out the gospel the best way I humanly can. And I love being a Christian. I will always be a Christian. I choose Christ no matter what. I think belief is always like a loaded word, but I think belief isn't like an examination of the heart of hearts and whether or not you truly believe. I think it's a choice and it's a trust. And so I do put my trust and faith in Jesus Christ. But as a Christian, I'm struggling. I'm not going to lie. I'm really struggling, guys. I have a lot of questions that I feel like have been answered. And I have a lot of questions that have I haven't been able to get good answers to. And so I trust your guys' judgment as brothers in Christ. Iron sharpens iron, and I'm here to do just that with you. And so I have a few questions if you guys would humor me a little bit.
Yeah, thank God, man. Be blessed.
For sure, bro.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any questions about anything I said, or
No.
just should I
Nope.
just move to the questions?
Shoot.
All right, cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. By the way, we can't hear you off the app.
Yeah.
What's that?
Never mind. I thought you were maybe trying to speak when you're off the app. I was just saying we can't hear you when you're off the app, but never mind.
Oh yeah, I know that. I'm pretty sure they haven't updated that, right? Like the mic doesn't work unless
Yeah.
you're on it.
Yeah.
That's actually I do like that feature. I hope they never get rid of it. But well, that way people are talking to you like in good faith. Like they're not like reading off a prompt. But
For real, yeah.
well, I mean, at least if they're in their car like me on their lunch break. But yeah, one of the questions I really have a issue with right now, guys, is the problem of divine silence, and I'll categorize that as this: in that I don't understand why a God who is so eager to be known and have relation and communion with us is so quiet. And I know that like quiet is going to be a relative term, and so you guys might ask me what do I mean by quiet. For example, I understand that like some people go to a rock concert and 140 decibels without earplugs is totally fine, but 140 decibels with someone with earplugs is a lot more comfortable. And so like when I say quiet, I think that like it kind of depends on like what you determine to be the voice or the presence or evidence of God speaking or moving or whatever. But unilaterally though, he wants a relationship with all. And I don't understand the problem of divine silence. Why is God so quiet when he's so eager to have a relationship with us?
Yeah, I would affirm that he's not silent at all. Like we see very well documented miracles that are continued into the modern day. For example, the Lady of Zatan is one that's I like to bring up a lot, which is happened in over a period of 3 years in 1968, where the Holy Theotokos appeared over this Coptic Orthodox church over the span of 3 years, right? It has photo documentation. It was witnessed by like estimates of in the millions of peoples, by mass crowds, by people that weren't just Christian but atheists, Muslims as well, and of course Christians. You also have things like I don't get into it too much, but I do know the Catholic Church does have a like deep history of confirmed miracles and those types of things that you could look into. But I think the most prominent one for me is the Lady of Zatan.
Yeah, and I do understand that, like
a-
for Catholics, sainthood, attaining sainthood is going to be. Oh, sorry, I cut someone off. My bad. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead. We're not Catholics, by the way.
Oh yeah. No, I know you're not. But he brought up like in the Catholic Church, it's well documented that there's miracles, which makes sense because performing a miracle is one of the sure ways to get sainthood. But yeah, what were you going to say? Voice of I can't read the rest of your name. Voice of something.
Voice of Romanides. And don't wear it out.
Okay, gotcha.
So the other thing is that the reason God is not silent, it's that our hearts are too loud.
Yeah, that's what my dad said.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, your dad's probably right.
He's a pretty smart guy. He's pretty smart.
I mean, yeah.
Um, yeah.
God is seen in the world. God is seen in the world through His operations, through the effects of His works, and by the creations of His hands. And He is seen by us in the interior life when we quiet ourselves, and that's why the Orthodox tradition emphasizes hesychasm.
Emphasizes what?
Hesychasm is the practice of constant interior prayer.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah. No, I think it's a great answer. That our hearts are too loud. I think that's a great
Well,
answer.
I
But
mean, what's the answer? What does Christ tell us? Christ tells us that blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. He doesn't say that, and everybody else does get to too. They just get to see it in a special way. No, it's that those who purify themselves attain to the vision of God.
yeah. Well, I think this kind of segues really well. I think I do accept your answer. I think that actually is an acceptable answer. I've heard it before, but I think it's repetition is a good indicator of a good example. So I accept that answer, but I think it's a really good segue into one of my other problems, which is you guys are going to be no stranger to this as being Orthodox brothers, but the lack of divine clarity. If God really is not if there is no divine silence and God is quiet and it's easy to have Him be known, then why is there so little divine clarity? If even amongst Christians there is such little agreement. I mean, I know there's major agreement on like the Nicene Creed, and I know you guys depart with the Filioque at that point, but there's a lot of agreement on the majors, just not the minors. But even on the minors, why is there such a lack of divine clarity about something that matters so much?
We don't think that there's a lack of clarity.
Yeah. I
But
think
there's a
it's
lack
very
of clarity
clear.
among the heterodox.
Yeah, I think the majority of the time, like the lack of clarity comes from, especially with Protestantism and the idea that you can be your own like interpreter and all this other stuff. Whenever it comes to like the apostolic churches, like Orthodoxy, for example, the clarity, it's very clear. There's well documented on what we affirm, what is dogmatic. We have documentation for what the church fathers believed and all sorts of those things. Now, obviously, that clarity, you have to read or talk to other people that have read it in order to receive that clarity. But I mean, that's like, I don't think that's much of a problem if you're believing in God and supposed to following Him, and you have a problem with like asking someone or reading a document that's already given to you for clarity. That's more of like one of the mortal sins being laziness, right? I mean, you could say the same thing even with the Bible, like, but I'm too lazy to read the Bible when the answers are right there. Like, see what I mean?
Yeah, sure. That's a good answer, but I mean, I get what you're saying, that it's more of a Protestant problem because every senior pastor at a non-denominational church becomes their own mini pope. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, they become the ultimate authority of like the interpreter, and so I understand that. The Orthodox or the Catholic Church being, the official interpreter is a good resolution for that, and to create clarity. And I think that's one of the greatest arguments for either the Catholic or the Orthodox Church, is that you have this magisterium or this church authority to interpret it for you. Because, I'm not Thomas Aquinas. You're not going to like me dropping C.S. Lewis, but I'm not C.S. Lewis, but I'm not going to be able to figure this out. I need someone who's thought it and figured it out for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's a good.
You make an excellent argument for why you should become a catechumen.
Why I should become a what?
Catechumen. So when
A catechumen.
So
What's a catechumen?
Yeah. So a catechumen is essentially, when it comes to the Orthodox Church, when you become a catechumen, you begin to learn about the church history, like what we affirm, the practices, etc. Right? And that's where you can go to ask these questions on clarity and confusion and what you affirm, like what's the reason and purpose behind this, where did this tradition develop, etc. Right? That's the purpose of becoming a catechumen. So like when you're bringing up these problems of like clarity and like struggles understanding certain topics, this is like exactly what becoming a catechumen would do, and like you would benefit from
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Yeah, the place that all these questions come from is not Tao. It comes from a place of, I think, that the truth that we believe to be can hold up against the highest form of scrutiny, and it's just honest pursuit. Like, I just want the truth and to understand more. So I appreciate you recognizing that. Yeah, I mean, I have another question for you guys, if you can humor me.
Yeah, of course.
Especially when talking with my agnostic and atheist friends, they don't understand. You and I understand that God doesn't send anyone to hell, obviously, that we choose separation from God. It's not him choosing separation for us. We choose that separation. But we make that distinction in our current lifetime, not this next one. And so my question for you is, why would there be an infinite outcome for finite understanding?
So like the infinite punishment,
If you-
in a sense. So like hell.
It doesn't even need to be necessarily infinite punishment. I don't like the word punishment because, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that separation looks like. I mean, we know it'll be like, the crying and gnashing of teeth. Like, it sounds not good. Like, it's probably not good. But I don't understand, whatever the outcome is, good or bad. If you treat it like a math equation, I'm no mathematician, by the way. I'm not smart enough. But I don't understand why there would be an infinite outcome for a finite understanding, if that makes sense.
So
I can clarify
ultimately,
more.
this is like a kind of like more of like a morality thing, right? Well, you got to understand, like, when you're talking to your atheist friends and stuff, these types of claims are called what we call normative claims. Normative claims are claims about like what ought to be morality based, like what's good, what's bad, etc. Right? From an atheistic perspective, they don't have an objective authority for their normative claims. Their normative claims are subjective. So that's either based on their own personal opinion, based on like the group around them, the society around them, etc. Right? So versus with us, our objective like basis for morality is God. So God being an all perfect, all knowing being, right? If this is what he does, this is what is okay with him, this is how it works, then this is ultimately going to be the perfect scenario, right? Because it's coming from a perfect being who has objective morality. When they can't really attack these claims or the morality of that, because ultimately their attacks are purely subjective, right? So
that's right. I understand that.
From their worldview, you saying that this is okay is just as correct as them saying this is wrong. And that could be for anything, even the most extreme scenarios or extreme things you could possibly affirm, because ultimately it's all subjective. So really, they can't really attack you or attack the morality on that, because all it is ultimately doing is it's just going to be based on their subjective opinion. So it's just like really me just saying.
You might want to ask them why they believe. You might want to ask them why they believe that an eternal reward is there as well, because if the eternal punishment is not merited from a finite amount of bad, neither is an eternal reward merited from a finite amount of good. They want to have the good, but they don't want to get the bad. It literally comes down to me no like bad thing, me do like good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, and I know that like looking at it through like the scales of justice is not really like the same as like a math equation. Like, I'm not trying to like bring justice or morality into it. I'm really just trying to bring in like the psychological element of we'll be held accountable for the knowledge that we've been given. And I understand that like I have limitations because of my own IQ. Someone may have a little bit more or a little bit less, statistically, but that's fine. But I have limitations, and the very fact that I have limitations means that I'm not able to fully grasp it on this plane. And so until we move into eternity, I never will. And do you accept that?
Yeah, that kind of points into what we call like epistemic limitations, which is like us being finite, like human beings. We obviously can't know these things, especially when it's like questions about like why did God do this and that. We're not God. We can't read his mind, right? We're only can know based on the information we have presented at that current time, right? So this those types of things that you're bringing up are kind of like epistemic limitations, is what we call them.
Okay, but it still doesn't make sense to me why there would be an infinite outcome based on finite limitations.
Yeah. Well, like the
Because God
grounding
became
or
man.
reasoning as to that is because that's what a perfectly moral being determined was perfectly moral. A perfect being determined
Okay.
this. So like that would be the grounding.
I
of
mean,
it.
I get that it's you and I are on the same page with like, and so we can put the cart before the horse a little bit and say that, well, because God made it that way, it's a good outcome, and I can accept that. But I think you and I both know that our materialist friends would not accept that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
And
he's
so
not.
I'm trying to think of a way that our
Yeah.
materialist friends would understand it.
For them, I would tell them that, like, help them understand that their morality and basis for morality is purely subjective. So ultimately, their grounding and reasoning as to why this is bad is just as correct as you saying that this is good. So like, it's really their moral claims don't matter or hold any weight logically.
Yeah, gotcha. I hear what you're saying. I think Sib needs to get brought up.
Yeah, he left real quick. I'll invite him back up.
Oh, sorry. I was just looking out for your homie.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, and I like, listen, I'm no theologian or, I don't really do this sort of thing. This is my second live ever. I usually just like, open up Pokemon cards on TikTok sometimes. Like, I don't really do this sort of thing. So I appreciate you like humoring me a little bit. But I would also kind of wanted to bring up that God lately to me kind of seems like the worst marketer of all time.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is Jesus Christ is, if we look at God as a marketer, Jesus Christ was the worst ad campaign of all time. But what I mean by that is that God, being all knowing and all powerful, created the very environment where a majority, as the scriptures tell us, will turn away from him and will not choose him, and that only few will end up with him. And so I'm getting that based on like narrow is the gate and few will enter. Maybe you have something else that I don't know about. I don't know my Bible as well as I should, and I'm embarrassed to say that, especially coming from a sola scriptura background. And I apologize. That's embarrassing for me to admit out loud. But yeah, like God is kind of like Jesus Christ was the worst like ad campaign of all time if God is a marketer, because if he knew the outcome and that only 10% were going to join him and the other 90% were going to spend eternity away from him, why would he ever create that in the first place?
I mean, ultimately, like, once again, that's kind of like an epistemic limitation, but him being a perfect being, this would just be the perfect scenario or the best scenario. And I would argue that we understand from the Bible and like what it says in Luke and that type of stuff, that we are judged based on the amount of revelation we receive. So with that being said, like, everyone's going to be judged fairly and equally based on the opportunity they had, the information they had, etc. Right? It's not like I'm going to be judged the same way someone born on North Sentinel Island is going to be judged. We're going to be judged with what's fair, or insofar as our circumstances and our knowledge. So with that being said, it's still coming from a perfect being, so it would be the perfect option, and B, I would argue that it is an extremely influential ad campaign, knowing that it's 2 billion people on the earth follow the religion currently. It's white, like the amount of people that know it or have heard of God or the Christian God is well beyond that figure. It's probably more than 90% of the population. I would say that the ad campaign overall was effective.
I mean, I think it's effective in the sense that like it's improbable and crazy that a small Jewish cult out of Jerusalem in the turn of the century, or sorry, the turn of the millennium, would evolve into the world's largest religion. I think that's in that point, yeah, I think it was an incredible ad campaign. But yet Scripture tells us that few will enter, and so when I read few, I have to assume a majority. So why would God ever create an existence where a majority don't end up with him and most end up not being with him? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just epistemic limitation, but whatever the decision in the world we're living in is, like, that decision he made is the morally perfect decision. So, I mean,
Okay.
it is what it is.
You mentioned too that like you mentioned I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, I was done saying speaking. You're all good.
You mentioned that we'll be held accountable to the amount of revelation that we've been given on this side of eternity. And one of the things I was thinking about recently in regards to that, you kind of jogged my memory, is I read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius every year, and the Stoics get a lot of things right. One of the things he acknowledges in his last chapter of Meditations is that he is very frustrated. I'm going somewhere with this. I'm going to land this plane, I promise. But Marcus Aurelius gets very frustrated. He changes his tune at the end of his life on how he feels about the Logos and his own mortality. And he basically points out that it's not fair that I'm going to verbatim this. It's kind of messy, but he basically says it's not fair that me living a stoic and respectful life towards the Logos is going to end up in the same darkness where my consciousness ceases to exist, that the basically that the unpious are going to end up in. That basically he's going to end up in the same place, and he recognizes that he has a mortal problem and that he's going to die, and he needs some sort of. He basically recognizes he needs some sort of intervention from the Logos to make so that he doesn't end up in the same place. The people he
Sounds
deems
like Marcus Aurelius realizes he needs the incarnation.
Yeah, and so my question for you is, do people basically, is it enough for people to know the symbol of Jesus? And when I say the symbol, I mean they recognize they're in a flawed state, they have a mortal problem, they're imperfect, and unless there's some sort of divine intervention, they are screwed. Is that sufficient based on the revelations that they were given in their time? Or do people need to know the literal personhood and name of Jesus Christ?
Ultimately, all we can know for sure is that we're judged biblically based on the amount of revelation we receive. So far as the information we have and we have access to, whatever the information they do have is sufficient in the sense of it being they're going to be judged fairly upon that in their decisions and the choices they made.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, because when I read Meditations, obviously Meditations is in scripture, and this comes from a flawed man, but watching him change his complete tune at the end of his life about his orientation and posture towards the Logos, which will just substitute God, and what he deserves and what he needs to be not lumped in with the unpious. I want to believe that was sufficient, and that he didn't need to know the literal name and personhood of Jesus Christ having died on a cross for him, because Christianity wasn't widespread in Rome yet. I mean, he was 180 AD, so maybe he heard of it as an underground cult. But yeah, I appreciate. I feel the same way. I guess I'm just saying, I feel validated in you having said that. We don't ultimately know until the other side of eternity, but I think that's a good answer, and I appreciate it.
I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, was Marcus Aurelius saved? Who knows? The question is that he recognizes the problem, and the solution has not yet been given. So, because he's a pagan, he hears the preaching of Christ in Hades, and there is revelation to, for example, Saint Athanasius of Sinai says that Plato was one of the first preaching.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. Well, I don't want to take any more screen time from anybody that has been waiting a long time as well. So I appreciate deeply you guys taking me on, and just to kind of land the plane. I'm still in my vagrant wandering of where I'm going to land denominationally, or just in alignment with the church. It's been a long time of personal study where that's going to be, but always enjoy interacting with Orthodox brothers and my Catholic brothers, and my non-denominational friends not so much these days. but God bless them, and God bless you guys.
Of course, appreciate it. God bless. See ya.
God bless. See ya.
Okay, this is where I'm gonna end the live, y'all. We've been live for 3 hours, so I appreciate all y'all on TikTok. Thank you. God bless y'all. Okay, YouTube. I'm ending the stream here. We've been live for 3 hours. Pretty good stream. I should be live tomorrow. And yeah, I appreciate y'all for all tuning in. If you have any more questions or want to talk more, join my Discord server. It's in the description of the stream and on my YouTube profile. That's where you can like ask more questions off stream. I'm always going to be on there. And yeah, I appreciate y'all for all